To the October 14th, 6:30 City Council meeting for Lafayette. We'll bring it to order. And flag salute will be first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call
Mayor Sproul,
here.
President Brungart,
Here.
Councilor Drebin,
Present.
Councilor Gilgan,
Present.
Councilor Goulart,
Present.
Councilor Newman,
Present.
Councilor Paulson.
Here.
You have a full council present, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. The first thing on the agenda is the Yamhill County Sheriff's.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Deputy McMahon, currently working swing shift for Lafayette. I'd like to go over the crime statistics. We're gonna go off of the report list first. There's 3 parts on this. There's 1 aggravated assault, 0 burglaries of business, 0 residential burglaries, 0 thefts, 0 motor vehicle thefts, 0 rapes. This category was down negative 88.89%. For part 2, the other category, there was 2. Disorderly conducts 1, drug laws 0, DUIs 1, forgery 0, frauds 2, liquor laws 0, runaways 1, sex offenses 0, simple assaults 7. That's a 75% increase. 0 stolen property. 0 trespass or prowlers. 1 vandalism and 3 weapon offenses. Part 2 category is an increase of 125%. Part 3, all other information type reports, there was 2. Non-reportable offenses, there were 6, which in part 3, that category is down negative 27.27%. Now for the more detailed call list. There were 8 wanted services, 13 alarms, 6 area checks, 26 traffic stops, 2 suicidal calls, 6 information calls, 6 custodial interference calls, 33 follow-up calls, 1 prowler call, 3 non-injury crashes, 1 unknown injury crash, 2 trespass calls, 1 domestic call, 7 domestics in progress, 8 calls dealing with assisting an outside agency, 18 extra patrols, mainly focused around washer, 5 harassment calls, 1 restraining order violation call, 2 restraining order violations occurring, 8 animal nuisance calls, 5 DHS calls, 1 stolen vehicle call, 7 civil complaints, 6 noise complaints, 9 suspicious circumstance call, 18 civil papers, 5 disturbance calls, 2 runaway calls, 5 detail calls, meetings, those types of things. 2 theft attempt calls, 3 theft calls, 2 animal abuse, 2 abandoned vehicles, 8 welfare checks, 3 hit and run calls, 5 RB ordinance type calls, 2 911 open line calls, 1 parking complaint call, 9 ordinance calls, 9 field investigation calls, 1 unwanted, 1 attempt to locate call, 1 shooting in progress call, 1 assault now call, 1 mental health call, one driving under the influence call, one missing person, and one fraud. Total calls for the month, 273. Of those, we did have some pretty major calls in September that required assistance help from McMinnville Police, our detective units. I checked over all the units that responded here in Lafayette. We had Carlton come out. We had ENLPD also come out. Of all the calls, 178 of the 273 calls, it was either myself, Deputy Schmidt, the other Lafayette deputy, or a combination of us both that responded. There were 80 calls where we were not working that rural deputies responded to and handled. Are there any questions? Well, that was kind of a long list.
It's very thorough, yeah.
I have a question about the weapons calls. I heard about two of them. I hadn't heard about the third one. The two I heard about was one was somebody actually got shot, and then there was a weapon fired near 7th somewhere that way. What's the third one?
You know, I'd have to look up the specific on that. I don't have the information for you currently. I apologize for that.
Okay.
What's the now? I see that on a couple of the different, like it's domestic now or shooting now. There were like
So,
a handful of the now.
so basically anything that had just occurred or is occurring
Oh,
in
okay.
progress. If we, some of these are, like you say, let's say a theft and a theft now.
Mhm.
A theft, it can be something that happened a couple days ago, happened the night before. So it's cold, it's not happening in the moment.
Oh, okay. And then I see there's a number of extra patrol that's got, I see a lot of them have Deputy Schmidt's number, and I saw one or two that had yours. What does the extra patrol mean?
So extra patrol is a focus patrol. And if you look at those, I noticed a lot of them around Washer Elementary.
Okay,
For the morning times, you know, kids getting dropped off at school. That
okay,
extra presence helps to deter any speeders and making sure there's not going to be any issues with the kids trying to cross the street. It does get kind of bogged down in the mornings and afternoons, actually.
so is that recorded just because he says, hey, I'm doing an extra patrol in this area?
Yeah.
So the dispatch is aware?
Yeah.
Okay,
And a lot of times when we do that, me personally, I'll put myself on an extra patrol sometimes, and then I will initiate traffic in that same area, just to show that, yes, we're in that area, try to focus our activity, our attention on that specific area.
okay, thanks for the explanation.
The times that are logged, the response date and time, is that when you're actually dispatched or when you close, when you're finished?
So those are the dispatch times.
Okay.
When the call comes in.
Correct. Should be pretty close to that, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Be a few minutes before they actually, sometimes calls come up as a medical call, for instance, first, and then they get broadcast to us also, and we respond. So that's gonna be when we're actually attached or responding to an incident.
Just a comment, I think Preston, I think it would be helpful if we had a summary that you just presented, you know, you had 8 of these, 13 of those, 15 of these. So if you're reading off of the summary, I think that would be helpful to include so that we don't necessarily have to wait for the Excel data and you know, parse it out ourselves.
I've kind of been taking this upon myself to break everything down, because when we get this list, they're just kind of scattered as far as this calls go.
Right.
I like to have it step by step so I can report to you. So this is something that I worked on before the meeting tonight and also last.
So did you find that the date and time cell, you had to split them out because you can't really sort them that well with the two different, you have a date and you have a time in there. So I'm having difficulty splitting these, and I'm actually putting them in a separate cell.
So right, yeah, in my system, I'm able to search for the
Got
one.
it.
And it
Okay.
comes up with every single incident. I can put whoever's unit was there, and I can see how many calls were attached to that specific unit. And that's how I determine.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you breaking down. I appreciate the summary. I really do. Yeah,
Happy to make copies, you know.
I'll try to get these out a little bit sooner, so maybe I can provide that also. I was kind of trying to get down to the wire here today, so.
Yeah, no problem. And I usually get the Excel file after the fact, so that's fine, no problem.
After the fact, you mean after the meeting?
Yeah, like I don't get it today, I might get it, tomorrow or next week, early next week sometime.
Well, Kevin should have that before the meeting, doesn't he?
He has sent it to me and I don't know if he sent it to me before or after the meeting, but it's close enough for me. I don't have any issues, so.
Okay.
I have a question about what's the best avenue to have a conversation specifically about an event that happened, just for protocol and for future reference for my own personal, not as a counselor, but as a citizen. What's the best avenue to have the conversation with the sheriff's department about specific events that are repeatedly happening at a specific location?
So we're only allowed to provide a certain amount of information to the public unless
It's more or less protocol is what I'm trying to allude to without giving a lot of specifics. But basically, there were several phone calls made to the non-emergency sheriff's department concerning one specific individual at a specific location on more than one time frame. And every sheriff that arrived had a different answer, or some had no answer. So just trying to resolve it so in the future we can perhaps have better information on what would be a better way to handle or resolve that situation. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, yes. I would probably have to know exactly what you're talking about in order to help out a little bit more, but I'm more than willing to try to answer any questions that I can.
So what would be the best way to contact you or to facilitate
The
that?
best way to get a hold of me
Basically,
is a non-emergency number. If I'm
Okay.
working, they'll give me a message right away. I'll give you a
Okay.
call back.
okay, I wasn't sure if that was the best
It's
avenue.
24 hours.
Email or
If I'm not
whatever.
on, email also,
Okay, can I get your,
of course,
Okay.
yes.
it's just dealing with Commons Park, ongoing
Okay.
issues
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So email's at the bottom. Don't worry about the case sensitive stuff. It's going to be lowercase.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the
Thank you.
expanded information.
The summary report is really very accurate. Thank you.
Okay, has everybody been able to read over the minutes? I wasn't here, so I don't have any input at all. Does anybody have any changes they'd like?
Greg's name was left off,
Okay,
and also it looks like on page 206 at the bottom, it says it passed 3-1, it should be 4-1.
okay. Okay, the last
The last line of,
last line of
Page
it,
2,
okay,
yes.
should be 4-1, and then where his name was left off of.
Attending the meeting,
call,
roll call.
Roll call,
even though in the report, it's got his name on the second
Mentioned
line
me.
about asking, so.
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
thanks, Jim.
Anything else?
Jim? Lee, did you have anything? Not forgetting.
Everything's good. Looks good to me.
How come we can't see Lee?
We can only hear you, not see you.
Yeah, we can only see ourselves.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, then I guess I need a motion that states the two changes.
Move to approve the meeting minutes from September 9th, 2021 with the noted changes.
Second,
One second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? None? Okay. Okay, the next thing is any additions or deletions from the menu, the agenda.
I just wanted to know, I do have one thing during the council reports that take 3 to 5 minutes, if we just leave it at the end for that.
Okay, and what's the topic of that?
It's just a request that I have to make.
Okay. Okay, is that okay if we add that, guys? Everybody's okay? Okay. Anything from the audience? Thank you. Okay, citizens input on non-agenda items. Does anybody out there have anything that they want to talk about that we don't have on the agenda? Thank you. Okay, the first thing that we're going to have is a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. And then if nobody in the council objects, I'm going to read the ordinance by title only. Does anybody have a problem with that?
By title only?
Yes.
So I was hoping that we could, unless a counselor objects, the charter allows us to pass an ordinance in one reading if it's read in full and by title. And we've talked about this urban renewal agency for a while. I don't think there's anything crazy in the proposed ordinance. It still takes 30 days to take effect. So instead of waiting for 2 more months from now, if we're all on board with creating the agency, not defining the district, then we could pass that tonight. If any counselor objects, then it would just, take that. So
I don't have any problem with it. Does anybody have a problem with it?
Section 2.38. I was just curious, do we have it defined anywhere with the duly authorized expenses?
Uh, 2.8 says that there would be no compensation, but reimbursed for business-related expenses, like counselors, if you went on a training mission or something, and they're authorized business-related expenses.
Okay.
is that authorized by the agency? Is that what it would be?
Well, it would follow common rules for expenditure of funds, which goes through staff and gets approved, eventually gets signed. There's no set council rules on that. You can certainly set up rules for that, but there's not with this ordinance.
Okay, so before we get any farther, the process here then, if we do this, is I read it by title and then in total, or in total?
You have to read it all.
Well, I think you need to read it all.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I don't have to read the title and then the title and total, just everything at one
I
time.
think you read it in total and
Okay,
then by title, the way the charter says.
okay,
But the vote has to be unanimous for one reading. So if any counselor is opposed to that, then we would just say, just read it by the title tonight and in full the next week. Or does it have to be in full the first reading and then it can be by title the next?
Can I jump in? I'm going to be opposed to it unless Preston or somebody else knows off the top of their head if that procedure in our charter does not conflict with ORS Chapter 203 for adopting ordinances. I don't know, but I know that's the chapter for adopting ordinances. And if our charter conflicts with that, I don't want to go through reading the entire thing if we're going to do this in a way that's invalid.
Wait, hold on. I believe you read that in its entirety to come up with your plan.
Right.
So you would have it in front of you.
It does, in a binder, look at
Right,
that.
in a binder, yeah.
I'm
So
looking for the.
instead of Preston answering, I think Jim, who's researched it, might have that answer.
So it says that in order to adopt an ordinance for an urban renewal agency, it has to be a non-emergency. So we couldn't pass it tonight as an emergency and take effect, which is why it has to take 30 days. It didn't appear to have any other, maybe I don't have it.
the question that I have is
Here we go.
just because it takes longer to okay it, what are we gonna get out of it?
We could
By
just start the
doing this?
process sooner. We just save a month for doing that.
So that's the only thing that by doing it that way.
It really doesn't short circuit the process at all. You would have another reading and a hearing, the second reading, and then that goes into the code, like Jim said, 30 days later. So having it on 2 meetings does not interrupt the process at all.
Okay. Don't you think by having it by 2 meetings, that gives the public more time to review it
Exactly.
and understand what we're doing?
Exactly. That's why in our charter, you're expecting to have 2 readings.
Yeah.
You don't have to have 2 readings, but you should have a good reason why, but you don't have to.
So my reasoning for doing it was, we've been talking about an urban renewal agency. I mean, when I first came on as a counselor in January, we talked about it. It was brought up before then. I haven't heard anything negative from anyone in the community this whole almost last year about it. And it's not setting boundaries. It's not setting details. It's saying it allows the city to create that agency.
Mhm.
In the charter, section 30, .1, it says, except as subsection 2 of the section allows adoption at a single meeting, and subsection 3 of this section allows reading by title only, an ordinance shall be fully and distinctly read in open council meeting on 2 different days before being adopted by council. So then section 2 says, except as subsection 3 of the section allows reading by title only, the council may adopt an ordinance at a single meeting by the express unanimous votes of all council members present, provided the ordinance is first read in full and then by title. And then on 3, it says when you can only read it by title. But I believe.
So does it say that it has to be a unanimous vote? Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Which is why if anybody opposed to it, then I wouldn't put forth the motion to do that. But I believe we still need to read it in full at least once.
I'm going to be opposed to it. I want there to be the regular amount of time for citizenry to react to this. So I don't agree with the reason to push it through in 1 reading.
I concur. I prefer the regular process.
Okay.
So do we need to read it in full this time, or can we read it in full next time?
Well, you wouldn't.
The regular process, you can read it by title both times.
Well, I know
Yeah.
that that's what we've always done.
Correct.
Okay.
That's Christine's right. You, yeah, unless there's a council objection, you just read the ordinance number and the title, and then you discuss.
Which allows the citizens to look it up in the current agenda packet that's already been listed on social media and on the website. So we don't have to necessarily read it for the citizens to look it up and understand what we're talking about before we choose to vote next month.
Right.
So then let me verify, because in where it says we can do it by title only, notice of so 3 copies of the ordinances are available for public inspection in the office of the custodian of city records, and notice of their availability is given by written notice posted at the city hall and 2 other public places in the city. Where were those posted?
We actually post 4 places.
Okay.
Outside our reader board here at City Hall, the post office, the Mercado of Bastos, and People's Market. We do that for all of our public notices. We post in those 4 places.
Okay.
Okay, so do we need a motion, or can we just vote or
I
take a
think we
concession?
should do the public hearing first is what we're doing.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay,
Yeah, so unless there's an objection, just read the ordinance number and the title, and then we'll do a stop report.
okay, I'm gonna open the public hearing for ordinance number 639, urban renewal agency creation. Okay, does the council object to reading the ordinance by title only?
I do not object.
Okay. The title 2, it is an ordinance of the Lafayette City Council declaring that blighted areas exist in the city of the Lafayette establishing the need for an urban renewal agency in the city and electing a method for exercising of the power of an urban renewal agency within the city, creating section 2.3 to 2.42 of the Lafayette Municipal Code. The ordinance is ordinance number 639. Is that, okay?
You got
Okay.
staff report.
Now, the staff report isn't until after the closed hearing of that. Okay, asking for public testimony on this ordinance. Does anybody in the public have a statement or something that they want to say about this? Now is your chance. No comments? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and then I'd like to call for the staff report, please.
Oh, thanks, Sharon. Well, Councilor Drummer did kind of mention what this ordinance does. It doesn't create an urban renewal district. That's the process that cities undertaken over the course of the next year. What this does is modify the code to allow the establishment of an urban renewal agency. So whether the city ends up going forward with an urban renewal district or not, those are fine changes to have in your code should you ever put in an agency in the future. And that can be amended. It can always be amended if for some reason you want to modify that in the future. Maria is going to mention a few things about the membership of that, which can all be handled in the future. So this doesn't interrupt the process. It's unless there's changes in the ordinance, that'll come back as a second reading on November 4th, and then it takes effect in 30 days. So this is customarily the very first thing you do as you march down the path for an urban renewal district, and it's very straightforward. That's all I have here.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the staff report? Okay. Okay, now is the time for us counselors or the council to talk about this ordinance. Does anybody have any statements or anything that they've read through that they are concerned about?
On section 2.33 Exhibit A, it talks about vacancies and removal. And then it defines that, but it doesn't mention removal at all. It just mentions vacancy. So, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but it just says any vacancy on the agency shall be filled by the same method as city council members filled. It doesn't address removal as the title suggests.
Yeah, I'll look at that. It's
Okay.
You got it.
The question that I had is the definition of 2.31, the membership. It says the membership consisting the agency shall be the same as the members of the city council. Now, does that include the city council statement, include the mayor?
You got it. Yes.
Okay,
You
that
are a
includes
member of the
everybody.
City council.
okay, great. Now, the other thing that I was concerned about, and I've been told that we can change this or not, is that I always felt that a urban renewal district would be good with the business people in the city and letting them have the say. So somewhere down the line, I would like to see some business people appointed to this agency. And I've been told that this can be changed if that's something that the council decides on.
Yeah, we can amend it later.
Yeah, we can amend it later.
Sure, you could have a combination council and business folks, but yeah, and typically once if an urban renewal district is formed, that's when you do it.
Okay.
Typically, yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to make sure of, is that we could add it to it or select maybe some citizens or business people or something to add to the whole process. But that's the only thing that I had a problem with.
Yeah, and just to point out, when we're going to be talking about later on about the Downtown Business Association, it mentions in there that they would have some input on the urban renewal development process and all of that. So,
Well, I could probably.
but I can see having them as members.
Maybe they would want to pick two of their group to sit on this thing with us too, which means it would expand the knowledge and the information, but quite a bit.
So just for clarification, any vacancies, the agency shall be filled the same method as the city council is filled. Typically, that's by mayoral appointment and then approved by the council. So is that, because it's not spelled out exactly, but is that what they're talking about?
No, they're not talking about that. What would happen is if, for instance, you quit the council, whoever was appointed in your position would also be part of this.
Correct.
So
If-
if the language could be changed slightly to reflect that.
And I think that it's pretty clear.
Because that was just slightly confusing to me, because typically that's how we fill appointments for vacancies on the other committees as well.
Right, well, and that really would apply more, Sheila, when you do appoint outside the council to
Right,
be the
yes.
members. But as it is now, the council sits during this formation process. You sit as an urban renewal agency board.
Right.
And by the time it's all done, I mean, there is legislation you approve to create the agency, you know, and so if a new counselor comes on, they're gonna be on the board.
It's automatic, like at an election time,
Right.
because I will be gone in 2 years. But you will stay 4 years. So the next mayor will automatically become the sitting person on the committee.
Can we just rely on the word again, 2.31 then, and take out 2.33? Because the 2.31 spells it out. If you're in the city council, you're in an agency.
Well, it's good to have 2.33 in there because really, I think the intention of the council is to have outside council people appointed. And you're gonna need it then. So I say leave it in and when you do appoint business folks, then that will apply. You know, it's more of a housekeeping thing, but I say leave it in so you don't forget about it. You know,
So I think it's a good idea in the event that somebody leaves mid-term.
yeah.
Exactly.
So 2.31 says though that it should be the same as the city council. So that's capped at 7 members for the city council. So if we're talking about bringing other people into the agency, that would conflict with 2.31.
Well, that's just down the road. That's just a suggestion to think about maybe down the road. Right now, it's going to sit with the council. And then at some point in time, if the council decides that it's a good idea to have a business person or a person from the community or something to sit on the board with them, then they can change this and add that person to it.
Yeah, you wanted reassurance that this could be amended before agreeing to that for in the event it couldn't be amended. You want it added now.
Right, exactly. I was concerned, but I've been told that we can change all of these resolutions pretty
It can be
simply.
amended.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion. If there is no more question for discussion items.
What's the motion for?
Well, at this point, it really is a
Suggested motion at the bottom of the ordinance.
it's really to schedule and set the second reading at this point for your next regular meeting on November 4th.
We already did the first reading, but I guess I can read the whole motion.
Yeah.
I move to conduct the first reading of the ordinance. Number 639, creating an urban renewal agency and amending the Lafayette Municipal Code, and to schedule a second reading on November 4th, 2021.
Do I have a second?
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed. Okay, so that's taken care of. Okay. Okay, so this is the second half of the creation of the downtown business group. What this here is asking for $11,000 from Larry for his process in setting up the downtown business group. And if Larry would like to mention something, would you like to say something about this?
Sure. We went through this with your absence last month, and I was hoping we would get it approved last month, but I'm hoping we do that tonight. I'm ready to get started immediately. It's a 6-month proposal to form a 501c6, get officers elected, put together a plan for improving the downtown business. So we start with getting a list of all of the businesses and property owners downtown. I think I know who the main people who are gonna make this happen with me. But I'm ready to get started if you give me the go ahead.
You've done a survey of all of the businesses and talked to a lot of the people. Do you feel that a 6-month period is going to be enough for them to get going and work on their own?
To get organized and put an initial plan together. And I think there'll be some continuation after that.
Okay.
You know, at some point in time, hopefully it'll be have enough energy to keep going on its own,
Right.
but it's gonna take a while.
You know, the question that I have is that the city is helping with the setup of the business portion of it, and it's helping with your process. How does the group get money after that if they want to do something? Do they fundraise? Do they get donations, donors? How does that work afterwards?
Well, initially, we don't need a lot of money to do what we're doing. I mean, the hardest part is gonna be find time for everybody to meet. But I would expect continuing funding would come from the group itself.
Okay, that answers my questions. Anybody else have any questions?
I just had a couple on the acronyms used in here, SEDCOR, MEDP and AVAs. Can you define those for me?
AVA is the winery designation. We're right in the middle of the wine country, so we should be talking to the AVAs, and they have monthly meetings that I would, and then the group would attend. MEDP is the McMinnville Economic Development Program, I guess.
Okay.
And I've worked closely with Jody Christensen there, and their leader just left, and they've just hired somebody new. And SEDCOR is the Salem Strategic Economic Development Corporation.
Thank you.
So I worked with SEDCOR as a small business development person for 3 years, a few years ago.
Hey, in your proposal, you've got some different numbered points. The first one says the initial effort will be to confirm your existing stakeholder interest that you figure your core group's about 10 to 12. Number 2 is you'll hold an initial meeting with the participants to elect officers of and form the nonprofit that we funded we provided funding for last meeting. Those two things, and then it goes on to continue. Those 2 things, what percentage of your effort or time or what do you think it's going to take to get those first 2 done?
By the end of the year, I would hope. The way I put the budget together is like 5 hours a week of my time, and trying to, get everybody, the 10 or 12 people involved who are going to continue this on to meet on their own, and I'm going to kind of be pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Developing the plan. I think the plan is, how are we going to do this? Getting the people is one thing. How are we going to make the downtown business district better? And, we can all define what better means, but it needs to be better.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions. We keep seeing your smiling, happy face.
You can't see me smiling.
Well, I can see your cheeks underneath there. But as far as the businesses who you're speaking on behalf of, representing themselves in a city council meeting, I totally support doing the downtown, business association and improving the downtown businesses, but what are they going to be responsible for? Because we're talking about citizenry money spend to create the group to start with, but then spending more of the citizens' funds to facilitate business opportunity and business improvement, but what is the business is going to be financially responsible for at this point? Like, where's their investment? I don't see them here representing themselves.
Well, yeah, because they're not part of anything yet, but
Right, but they want to,
their investment
Get it
initially
together.
is gonna be time. Time and energy. Without that time and energy, nothing's gonna happen. And, the money that I put in is a bare minimum for my time.
right.
Because I want to see this happen in Lafayette.
Well, I'd like to see it too, but I'd also like to see, some business owners kind of represent their presence, that this is important to them, that, make a presence known so that we know that it's going to happen and continue to happen.
When we have
because-
this group of 10 to 12, and when I meet with your lawyer to determine what do we need to have to do the 501c6, you will get that information back as soon as I have. I mean, if you want a report on a monthly basis at the city council meeting, I'd be happy to do that.
No, I'm not necessarily asking for that. What I'm asking for is the city council funded money to start the program, and now there's another budget and request for more funding. But I don't see the businesses represented. I see you represented and your idea and your goal and your plan, which is all very good. But I personally would have liked to see business owners say, yeah, we are here to make this work. Like, we support and we will help you facilitate this.
Yeah, and the initial survey I did identified certain major businesses downtown that will participate.
Okay.
We just need to present the opportunity to them.
I think economically wise, what they're going to put in and add to monetarily wise will be determined at a later date. Depending on, for instance, I'm sure about which business can afford what, what we're doing and that type of stuff. Because, a lot of the businesses are small versus
Right.
other ones are bigger. So you may see certain businesses putting certain amount of money and smaller ones being smaller, but that's going to be determined by the group as to what their programs and their vision is.
Right, I guess my point is to spend more money out of the budget towards a program and a plan and see one person representing that plan is a little more difficult for me to want to, perpetuate spending more money. I guess
I
that's
think
my point.
Larry's kind of like the
Cart
the
before the
leader,
horse.
the agent over
Yeah.
this to get it going. I see your point, but I also kind of see his point, like, how do I get these people here when we don't have a solid plan yet?
Right.
So he's taking that leadership role.
It could have been a result in the first survey that there was nobody really interested in spending time and energy.
Right.
So the good thing about the first survey was there is a cadre of people that really want, Alex Sidabastos and Shannon Thorson and Arturo at Hamlin and Ed at Roadhouse Pub. And we've lost Don Lear because he was going to be a big part of this. But the people, have said they want to participate, and then COVID hit, so we've had a gap.
Right, and I understand it's difficult
So it's going to be a
financially
little more
for,
difficult to
businesses.
regroup the
Right.
energy. But
Well, you have Janice. Janice is still around that's handling, I think, her Dawn stuff. So I'm sure that she will be an active role in this group too.
good.
Yeah, if I could jump in, there's, with this facilitation, the money last month for the 501c6, I mean, the city is the catalyst for getting this going. There's no guarantees
Right.
of what the future is going to hold. But this group, and Larry kind of talks about it a little bit here, but and developing a plan, but this group will do a lot more that we should not be involved in, like recruiting businesses. That's not something the city should be involved in. It should be the downtown folks doing that. I envision this group getting together and bringing in resources that assist them in their business activities. There's things that are available through the state. There are other consultants. I know Larry's tapping on into a few to come and present, Main Street type ideas that could happen. None of that happens without a core group of downtown business folks. I envision them coming to the city in future years saying, we'd like a grant to help do a market study. Folks that can come in and say, these are the products that you should be selling in your town. Things like that. So the city's the catalyst, and every successful downtown has a business group at its core. And so I have good feelings it's going to continue. Larry's on the ground floor here. I think it's going to be great. No guarantees. No guarantees.
But Larry has a history with this too, where
You
he's
bet.
been successful elsewhere. So that speaks volumes for me.
Oh, it totally does. I don't think that my point was being made clear. So I feel like Larry showing up and making the proposal is fabulous. I completely 100% agree
But I
on it.
think Larry's making it on behalf of the
Right,
people
yeah.
who's talking.
It just would make me feel a little better if a business owner or two in the gallery would have said, yes, we're here. We plan on helping them support others. That's what I'm saying.
But when I'm talking about business owners, I'm also talking about property owners.
Right.
And people looking to develop property and getting them to understand that Lafayette is open and anxious for your business and getting in front of these people. So I will be, before the group gets organized, I will attend meetings with people. And then the group needs to have people doing their job.
Right.
So, I want to say that I'm in full support of businesses of the Downtown Business Association. If everything happens like it's on paper here, then I think we're going to be off to a great start. There's a lot of big steps that I see that need to fall into place. And like Preston said, there's no guarantee. My question that I asked you, you said that we should be able to have the formation of that by the end of the year. We've provided funds for that. There's 11 weeks left in this year. You estimated 5 hours a week. That's $4,400. What I would like to see is we could fund that much and say, okay, let's get the formation of that nonprofit put together. We can get some of those members then to come tell us about that. As Councilor Newman has requested, I think it's a great idea. I want to see a little bit, it broken up a little bit more instead of, just signing off on the whole amount. And because we may need to adjust, and I'm okay with making adjustments. And if the total ends up needing to be more than this 11,000, then I'm okay with that if it's justified. But I'm a little uneasy with putting that all up front in one large chunk. I would like to see those first two goals achieved first, and then we can talk about this again.
I'm trying to remember, but I think that I read here that he's being paid $1,400 a month. And he's not being given the total amount up front. He's being paid $1,400 a month.
It's a monthly, and I have also reduced my
Right.
hourly
Yes.
pay about 40%.
So I think what you're asking for has already been done. We're not writing a check for $11,000 up front. We're writing a check each month for $1,400. Now, if you would like to review what has been, and he said he was going to give us monthly reports, if you would like to review those and then rediscuss it, we can do that. But I don't think that there's any reason to, stop it right now.
I'm not interested in making a monthly motion to pay Larry.
I don't want to do a monthly either.
Authorize it.
I'm saying he said by the end of the year, he should have that formation. We've allocated, hold on. We've already given $5,000 for the creation of a nonprofit. He's saying by the end of the year, by his proposal, he says he's billing at 80 hours a week. He's estimating 5 hours a week. $80 an hour, 5 hours a week. There's 11 weeks left in the year. If I'm taking Larry's word on paper, as much as he just answered my question, that's $4,400. We don't have to set that as the limit, but I don't want to just say, just go. I want to say, all right, let's get those first two things done and then check in and go from there.
I'm not interested in micromanaging this project.
Yeah, and can I just jump in, and this is a little bit in response to Jim and a little bit to Sheila. Yeah, there's been mention that the business owners aren't here. I'm sure they are motivated to do whatever they can to increase their business, but In addition, yes, this is money of the citizens, but the citizens have been begging for us to do something downtown. And this is our opportunity. I'm full bore ahead on this.
I agree. I think $11,000 is a drop in the bucket for what our citizens are asking for.
And the
And I'm
reason,
not interested in doing anything that's gonna slow it down. If you have to come back at the end of December or at the January meeting, say, okay, here's where we are. We had to pause
This is
because
very
we haven't
good pause.
authorized, continued spending on this.
You know-
I think 6 months is very reasonable.
Well, I think in here too, Larry had anticipated and hoped to have started earlier, so.
you know, I've been talking to a company called Retail Strategies, which does somewhat like what Larry does, but not as much and not as detailed and hands-on as Larry does. And their basic price to start out is $25,000. So I don't think that 11,000 is too hard, and I don't think the way that Larry has set this up is out of line at all.
I do need to clarify, Larry said we haven't done, but what he really means is by the end of the year, it's reasonable to have the application in for the 501c service.
We'll know the players, but the plan is the biggest part of the 6-month project. And that's not gonna be done by the end.
Right. Just steps 1 and 2 was the goal, or what you thought might be useful. but-
So my thought was we would have some more players, some more faces that we could identify instead of you saying, well, I'm representing everything.
Oh, sure.
Because again, I support a healthy downtown business association. I just see this as kind of too strung out right now to
But I also.
say
think
it's all gonna happen in 6
When I
months.
say, like 5 hours a week, it's gonna take me a little bit more of that, at least initially. And you're not gonna get billed for that. So I think we're equivalent. I think the $11,000 was actually a little bit less than that. Was a pretty fair proposal.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Yes, Hillary?
I just wanted to throw my support to the full 11,000 as a taxpayer. You know, it was spoken on, I want to make sure we're spending money correctly, and Counselor, so, are mentioning, I don't want to see it slowing down, and we've been asking for this. And I personally think to be able to go back to the business owners and have the full 11,000 funded instead of little micro steps is gonna help build the momentum to get them on board. As a business owner, I'd be really skeptical of like committing to being in the group if it's like, oh, we've only gotten partial funding for the start. I just wanna, mention that would it help encourage the business owners if they see the financial backing.
Thank you for your opinion. Okay, I'm gonna call for a motion on this.
I move to approve the consultant services of Larry Strober and the Economic Advancement Group to facilitate a downtown business association group and authorize the expenditure of approximately $11,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, passed unanimously.
Thank you, Larry.
thank you, guys.
Look forward to working with you, Larry.
See you next month.
Okay. Okay, the restaurant relief program, what we need to do is decide, do we want to continue it and for how long?
I think it should end.
Sorry,
I think it should end.
okay,
I agree.
okay.
I think they're open without constraints. Construction has ended, phase, mostly.
Minus the sidewalks.
Probably,
Yeah, the sidewalks are still being worked on. I know that impacts foot traffic, but I'm not sure we have a heavy pedestrian area at this point, especially this time of year anyways.
It's just intermittent road closures when the concrete trucks come through.
I think the purpose of why we implemented is gone at this point, so.
I agree. I think it's time. I think it had an amazing run.
I don't know if anybody has read the news register lately, but on Friday, October 8th, there was an article in there from the commissioners that evidently 2.25 million of the ARPA funds that are given to the county are going to be set for economic impact. So there's a lot of money that's coming down the pike for these people if they apply for it.
Will be good for businesses.
Yeah, it's for economic input, economic impact.
Right.
Mhm. But 2.5 million for this county is pretty good. That's a pretty good amount.
Yeah, where are they getting that money?
Well, they're getting it from our relief fund, our restaurant relief fund, no. Anyway. So what we'd like to do then, I need a motion to
Oh, I wanted to clarify that. Why proposing the November 30th date, not the October 31st?
It gives people time to turn in their receipts, and it sets a deadline. We've had folks.
But you're not gonna count any receipts that are past October 31st?
no, it ends on October 31st.
Okay.
And then they have a month to get those receipts
Yeah.
from.
I just wanna make sure that was the scenario, not.
Not only getting the receipts in, but having the office staff be able to have that reflect on their bill.
Yeah,
I think that also is the importance of the time frame.
I just wanna make sure it was receipts no later than October 31st.
Correct.
Okay. Can I get a motion?
I move to end the restaurant relief program on October 31st, 2021, and require all credit requests and receipts to be submitted to the city hall by November 30th of 2021.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Okay, I have two appointments to put before you people today. The first appointment is for the Planning Commission, and the gentleman that I would like to appoint is George Larson. When I talked to George, George has been on the Water Committee for 7 years. And he has done a lot of other committees, but budget and otherwise. And the thing that I was impressed with George the most about is he actually had some ideas of what the city could do. He had some goals in mind, and he had some interesting things to talk about. So I think he would be a good addition to the Planning Commission. And I'd like to introduce him today. This is George Larson. If anybody has any questions.
I just kind of actually have a question for maybe Preston. The date on here is back in April. Was there just not, I thought there was a position available. Why did we wait so long?
Well, we've been advertising for a long time
Yeah.
on that, and I think George even had another application that was prior to this, so he's been keeping it fresh,
Okay.
but we just have these applications, and that's it.
I just want to make sure we're not sitting for months and not getting back to people who.
No, one of the reasons that I sat on that is because I advertised on social media, and then Christine did too. I wanted to see if we could get some more people involved, and we didn't.
In our last round of appointments, I did receive George's application pad, and he was one of the people I talked to. I talked to everybody for all the positions, so.
Yeah.
There were just many more applicants than that one to choose from, so.
And typically, we don't send the applications on to the mayor until we have two.
Oh, okay.
If just one's sitting there, then we wait till we get a second one.
What is, just a clarification, what is the importance of doing that? To have two people to choose from, or because if there's a vacancy, it seems like we would want to fill that vacancy sooner rather than later.
That's true. And that was something council directed a long time ago. I believe 10 years ago.
So that's a council direction to you.
It was, and so I just kept doing that way.
From noting that it was from April and we had waited several months to fill the positions that have been vacant, I also had the same question.
I feel like that decision, going away from this, that decision should rest on the mayor, not on the city to wait. If you want to wait for a second, or if the mayor wants to wait for a second application, that's up to the mayor.
Who makes the appointments?
Is that only for planning commission positions, or is that
No, I
all positions that your policy to wait for two
All
more?
positions.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if something was slipping or what was going on. I
No,
want
I-
to make sure that citizens aren't waiting.
I was aware of
Months.
George's application, but I wanted to wait until we got, at least had some time to advertise it more, to see if there was more than one person involved.
And I totally respect that. I just.
Yeah.
wanted to
And
clarify.
thank you for your service to the water board. It's much appreciated.
So does anybody have any questions for George? Okay, then I need a motion.
Move to appoint George Larson to the planning commission for a term ending December 31st, 2023.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All opposed? Welcome aboard, George.
All right. I can leave.
Yes, you
You
can.
can be really,
Preston will get with you with the next scheduled meeting and get you all set up,
He knows my number.
Yes, he does.
George.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Okay, the next person that I would like to appoint to the budget committee is Hannah Valquez. Hannah's a relatively new citizen of us. She's only been with us a year. She's got a degree in political science. She's very interested in doing community service. She has been experienced with city councils in a couple of other cities that she's worked at. And she's just a really delightful person. I think she would be good. And she wanted to do the planning commission, but when we talked, she had some issues when it came to childcare and different things like that, that she couldn't go to meetings. So what we did is we talked a little bit and decided that the budget committee, being the first meeting would be in April, would be good for her, because that would give her a chance to get everything settled in her life.
So she would go to the budget committee instead of
Yes.
the planning.
Yes. And I didn't want to lose her, and so we talked about that, and that's what we came up with.
Yeah, she's on board.
Okay, anybody, and unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight, but if you want to take my word for it, I think she's gonna be a good addition to us.
Is it normal to have applicants kind of, I don't want to say testify, but present themselves? I thought that's what the applications were for.
I like to have people come. Every time I have talked to somebody, I've asked them and invited them to come. I know that when I was appointed, I came to the meeting myself. And I think it's good for us to be able to, if you want to talk to them and also see who they are and stuff like that. There's no fast rule not to.
Right.
If you don't want that, then I can change my process.
Well, it has been tradition. Now, we got messed up with the COVID, but for all the appointments, to invite those employees, we would like to have them here to be discussed, or even be interviewed.
And it's up to them. I give them the
There's
option.
Sometimes they've come and sometimes they haven't.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's up to them. I just like to extend that and say,
I have no problem with that. I was just wondering, because it seemed like things went different a little bit in the spring, so.
right, no,
I enjoy seeing them when they do come and interacting with them, because it puts a name with the face, but it also kind of goes to testify to their commitment to,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, I would like a motion for Hannah, please.
I move to appoint Hannah Velquez to the budget committee for a term ending December 31st of 2022.
I second that.
All in favor?
All right.
All opposed? Okay, that means that we just have one vacancy left. So,
On the planning commission?
no, the planning
On the
commission
budget.
is full, it's the budget committee. So we have some time to find one.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now. The next question is a question that came up last meeting about funding the Lafayette Community Activities Team. Okay, and I think when I listened to the tape and I watched the thing, we got off on a discussion that really isn't anything to do with what the council needs to decide on, okay? There was a discussion about whether we should set up a 501(c) or not. That hasn't anything to do with what is being done here. What's being done here is asking you as a council to help fund this committee. And that's it.
Not committee, because it's not. a
Well,
I just want to clarify.
activities team,
Right, yeah.
activities team.
We had a long discussion about that when I presented the idea, that we didn't want to misrepresent that it was going to be a committee. So there's not an appointment from the council. The council has absolutely no authority or interaction with the group. The point of the group is to take some of the great activities that we currently have and some great activities that citizens have included in, like Hillary, and group them together, but expand them to do things in the future, not right off, obviously. Things like senior bingo, things like increase when we did the cooling shelter. Perhaps having a list of the seniors and we could knock on their doors, not just rely on social media for that information to get out there. There's so many things that we can do to improve the citizenry, the community, things, simple things like start the community garden and the extra produce go to our own food pantry. I mean, there's so many different things where we can expand, and that's the goal of it, is to create a more unified community and to basically take the activities that the city is currently running and take them back and give them to the citizens. So it would be from the citizens, for the citizens, about the citizens. It would not be anything to do with the city council. It would not have the city staff be running our community activities. That's the goal.
And what we're asking for is just enough money to get started and get our 501(c) set up and get going on a couple of maybe projects. And other than that, because I did some research on the 501(c) and with the size of the 501(c) that we're going to be creating, it's really a piece of cake.
Do you know what this is?
Under 50,000. The government splits it at 50,000. So if you're at 50,000, you only have to do a small amount of paperwork. Where at 50,000 and above, then you have to do more. We're not going to be running $50,000 in our account in any year.
At least not to start with, and you can change it later, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But that is beside the point. The point about it is a council, do we want to fund this activity team and start centralizing some of the activities and expanding the activities, not only to children, but to adults, get the whole community involved. A lot of the citizens right now have done a wonderful, wonderful job on small venues. But we need something that we can reach the whole city and everybody. And I think that this activities team can do that.
I love it.
Like it?
I'm in full support.
Thank you. My name is Michael Shaw, 1127 Bridge Loop. And I'd like to thank the council. You approved my appointment to the planning commission and I didn't show up because it was optional during the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. As for this activities group, is there representation currently here to talk about it, what their goals would be, structure, and having been a nonprofit consultant, even the short form 501(c)(3)s can take 6 months, and depending on how complete it is, it doesn't take much to muddy up the process.
Sheila has done a lot of discussion with a lot of people within the city. We haven't openly asked for volunteers yet because we didn't know if we could get it set up or not. because we needed a certain amount of funding. It's the same way with Larry. We need the funding before we can do the rest of it. And the reason that we're going with the 501c is because that allows us to
Except charity.
fundraise our own money and be able to that. So we wouldn't necessarily have to always or even ask the city for any money,
Mhm.
you know, and that's
Well,
what it is.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's, you know,
And I'm the person here representing it. It was my idea
yeah,
back when COVID happened, and I saw a lot of different things go on in our community. And I felt like there should be a core group that was the point person, if you will, for reaching out for things. We had a community member have a house fire, you know, and as a citizen, I felt like there should have been some group that is a network. So it's mostly creating a network with the idea of like the PTA, where there's a core group, but everybody's welcome to volunteer and help set it up, you know, very specifically. I have a very specific idea in mind with where it can go, but I'm also very much interested in what the citizens feel. And it's, like I said, very much a networking, starting a community garden with the produce, extra produce going to our food bank, or networking with the scouts, which Greg is a great contact for the scouts, to have maybe a list of seniors or handicapped people in the community that need help with their yard work. That helps everybody in the community, and just networking like that. So that's the goal of the activities. Everything would be under that umbrella.
we did have a lady, her name was Linda Lyons, who had a group called the Lafayette Citizens Committee, I think it was. And they used to do, they're relatively small, but they used to do a bingo night, and they used to do, you know, and they made enough money to add a bench down at the park and stuff like that. And it worked very well, but it was not something that was advertised or I don't think the citizens were ready for yet. And so it stayed rather small. From the people that I have talked to, the people Sheila's talked to, everybody thinks that's great. They want to see events that create community for not only children, but for adults too. You know, and we don't, to be honest with you, we don't have anything like all encompassing like that. And so what we want to do is start this group, and we're asking the city to help us, and then we'll go from there. You know, and then we'll announce to everybody, you know, we're setting this group up, who would like to be involved? And whoever would like to be involved, however small, we're more than happy to have them involved.
Does that answer your questions?
Well, it appears that there's sort of a chicken and the egg thing going on in this process. Determining, okay, this is something that's needed, that's great, and I wholeheartedly agree, okay? But unless you've got the person identified that's going to spearhead, and
Sheila and myself.
that's you.
That's me.
Okay. I think I missed that.
Okay, yes. And we also have a couple other people that very much want to be in the core group. My goal is to have 5 or 6 core people
Sure.
that actually spearhead it, and then hand each event off to different community members. That's what they want to take on. I have a community member that said, hey, I want to do senior bingo night. That'd be fabulous. That would be your baby. I wouldn't have to run that, but I will make sure that it keeps going. So that's the goal.
A lot of this was born out of when it got so hot. And Preston and Christine and I and the staff ran around like crazy to take care and get some cooling stations, cooling areas set up so that our people could, if they use them or not, were there in case of an emergency. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a group of people that are already set up to contribute and volunteer to say, listen, this is what we've got to do. Let's go do it. Hillary was one of the ladies that we called on, and she was wonderful about getting us a whole bunch of stuff for the children. So if they showed up, they had stuff to do and stuff like that. So we know the want is out there. We just have to get it started and get it organized. And that's what we're asking the city to help us with.
But I do want to make it clear that I would be spearheading this as a citizen, not as a counselor. So it would not be something that's contingent on me sitting on the board. I want to be very clear to the citizens. It is not about the council running it, controlling it, or having any say on it. It would be me as a citizen doing.
Under the Oregon rules, aren't you always in your role as a counselor, whether or not you're sitting in the council room?
Well, what I'm saying is I'm not going to drop the ball if I don't get elected.
No, I understand. I think my question is, this is not going to be a government committee. It's not going to be related to the council. But I was just told that Sheila and Marie are spearheading this. So are the two of you voting on this?
Voting on what? We haven't
On whether or
voted
not we fund this?
Well, Marie's not voting unless
I
there's a
don't
tie
vote.
anyways.
Right. I understand that, but if there were a tie, she would vote. Right. But I mean, I think the question still out
Sheila
there.
abstain.
I plan on abstaining, yes, because I don't want to have any.
Okay.
I think propriety in the situation.
I
And we just
think-
haven't got to that point yet where I would declare that, like, I
Yeah.
would declare that once it's.
I think that's where my concern is here is just, if we're just gonna go out, start funding 501c3s in the community for different events that pass as community events, I just don't think that's our role. Now, if there is a 501c3 out there that is really interested in doing in community events, I think they should apply for grants. We just gave a bunch away this year. I would love to fund a program like that through there. But to just fund the start of a 501c3, I think opens a floodgate I don't want to open, and I don't think it's our role.
Okay,
So there's a concern, I'm sorry, there's a concern in the community that people want to volunteer and they're not being able to. So just like people are begging for a downtown business association, people want activities, they want some say in it, they want to volunteer and they're being told they can't.
Who's
And-
telling them that, John?
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah.
Who's telling them that?
Who's telling people they can't volunteer?
The city administration,
No.
would you like a specific example?
Yes, I would.
The representative from the PTA called at the end of September and they said, we have some people that want to volunteer for the Pumpkin Fest. We want to hand out some goodie bags. And they were told it's too late. Nope, you can't.
that's not the full story.
Yeah, that's a mischaracterization of what we do, Jim. When I came to this city, the city was not involved in any community events whatsoever. All the events you have now are the result of a council and a city administration that has been building this community.
So other than the fire department, because I know they put a lot of volunteer hours in, what community members have volunteered for one of these city-sponsored activities in the last year, in the last year and a half, in the last 2 years?
A lot of things have been shut down for the COVID, to be fair.
Yes, but several of the community, some of the community events have been all initiated by members of the community. Some were initiated by the city, but.
I'm talking about city funded, if we're taking city funds to pay for the activity.
Correct.
So let's focus on those.
I'm talking about all of those, yes.
You're including other ones besides that. I'm saying, because yes, we've seen some great activities come from citizens. But those aren't the city funded events. I don't want to rat hole this, but I'm advocating for this because I see a need that there are more people in the community that want to volunteer that aren't able to do that right now. And I think this is a great way to allow that.
Well, I think they should get together then and put a group together that does that. But I don't think that makes it the government's role to put together a 501c3 that, for all we know, could fizzle out like the old group that Marie mentioned earlier. I mean,
Lady
it's just
died.
not our role.
The lady died.
Yeah, Linda passed away.
Linda passed away.
We
The,
have,
the person who was running the last one. It wasn't set up in a way that was sustainable beyond the original group.
But if this isn't a government committee, how are we going to try to ensure that this one is? I mean, that's not really our role either.
Okay, let me go back to this here, okay. If the council feels that it's worth it to give Sheila and I a $5,000 grant to get this started, that's fine. If they don't feel that it has nothing to do with the 501c or anything like that, we're asking for a grant to get this rolling. Now, if they want to do that, that's fine. If not, we'll find the money somewhere else.
And that's what I would encourage to happen. The other thing is, just as a as an elected person, I'm not going to vote to give $5,000 to two other elected folks on the same government body. I'm not going to do.
Fair enough, fair enough,
I think that would really look like a conflict of interest.
fair enough. Fair
And,
enough.
if the council had, a fund for funding community, private organizations, then the cleanliness is there and no perception of impropriety, would be existent.
Sure, excellent.
What if you two spearheading it, create the group, start your meetings, build all the components that you would need that are required by a 501c3, including your board with your plan, and then submit a grant application through the city. The city takes grant applications for 501c. We're not tied to only give them out once a year. We can give them at any time when an application for a grant comes in. What if it was approached that way? That helps remove, some of these things that could be perceived as problematic.
Sure, sure, not a problem. What we will do is Sheila and I will continue on, and then when we get ready, we'll apply for a grant.
I just want to say one last thing. I hope it works out. I just did not want to go about it this way, but I hope you guys move forward and make it work. And I'd love to see the grant request.
If you don't feel comfortable with that, that's fine with me. I understand it completely. But we will move forward.
And for the record, Mayor, I don't know of people that have been turned away. Maybe, but Jim's example is not a good example. The PTA wanted to do their event in conjunction with us. That wasn't going to fly. They can do their separate event at the school. They didn't volunteer for our event. Two different things.
In talking to the citizens, I had heard on more than one occasion that people had requested to volunteer for certain activities, and they were told no by the city's different city staff members, not one specifically. So there was no clear answer, but that is not the first time that I have heard that. So I do want to be clear. I have heard that in talking to other citizens.
Well, you should tell me about that. And not bring hearsay into the meeting, but you should tell me about that. I should know about those.
We're getting off of that subject a little bit here. If you have heard of some problem like that, then you need to talk to Preston about it so he can get to the bottom of it. Because they shouldn't be turned away now if they've already got enough volunteers for a project, there's nothing that they can do. So anyway, okay, well, then we'll move on to the next one, the Urban Renewal District Boundary Project List. Okay, now, I am kind of confused on this. Are we supposed to be creating or talking? Maybe you should, with your staff report, tell us what should be happening.
Well, at this point, Your Honor, we do have Elaine Howard, our consultant. She's up on the screen there. Hi,
There she
Elaine. Yeah, there you go. And I can certainly assist, Your Honor, but I think we should turn the discussion over for staff report from our consultant, Elaine.
Okay, Elaine, you're up.
Great, thank you. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Go for it. Please do.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, we might have to accept it though. Oh, will it just pop up?
What is sharing the screen?
That's when she's showing us her computer screen.
Oh, I
Yep.
got you.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
sharing from-
I got you.
There.
We see it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for letting me come visit with you a bit tonight. What we are doing is the beginning of talking about forming your urban renewal plan. There's really only one decision that has to be made tonight, and if we can't make it tonight, it just needs to be made soon. The rest of the meeting is just talking about types of projects so that you can start thinking about that and give us input so that we can bring you back any other information you need. So this is what we were going to talk about: establishing the agency, reviewing boundaries, reviewing projects, and then next steps as we move forward on the urban renewal plan. So just a reminder on terminology. UR means urban renewal. URA is an urban renewal area. URD is an urban renewal district, sometimes used interchangeably with urban renewal area. TIF is tax increment funds or tax increment financing. That is the funding source for an urban renewal area. MI is maximum indebtedness and AV is assessed value. We will probably go over these terms every time we meet with you, just to help you feel comfortable with them and be able to use them as you're out talking to the public, because we find they're very confusing with a lot of other terms like urban growth boundary, or city, different city boundaries and different plans. So we just try to help you understand the terminology, just as a learning tool. So what you did tonight was create your agency. I actually helped draft some of that information, and so wanted to, if it's okay, just give you 2 items of input as you're thinking about this in the future. That change to your code was really drafted in the same format as the Planning Commission is set up in your code, and except for the fact that an urban renewal agency is typically members of the city council. I've worked, gosh, it's almost 17 years now, just doing urban renewal consulting around the state. I find that having the city council as an agency board works best. When I first started, I didn't always believe that. What I found over the years is when you start spending money, people want to know who has the authority to make those decisions on spending that money, and that those people are elected people that if they don't like what's going on, they can change that through an election process. So you talked a little bit about having some business people on the board. There are a couple of communities that do that. I know Wood Village, where Preston and I worked on a plan before, had a business person on their board. There are a couple other cities that do that. And I think that works as long as you have your city council also on the board, so that people in your community who need to talk to somebody about the money and how it's being spent can talk to those city council members. Those were, the other thing you asked is about spending money and expenses. And that again was taken both from what your city council can do and what your planning commission can do that's already in your municipal code. So whatever way you have set up to approve those would also be the way that you would approve them for the agency. So we tried to just mirror what already existed in your code so that you didn't have to set up new procedures. Any questions on that? I don't see any, but I can't, you guys are eensy beensy, like 2 inches wide on my screen now. So if you have something, just talk. I can't see you well enough to know. Looks like
We're okay. We'll definitely holler. We're a noisy bunch.
okay, thank you. So the 2 things we're going to talk about tonight in more detail are the number 1, the boundary, and number 2, potential projects. The boundary is something that we have to begin any of our final analysis for the urban renewal area. There are about 30 tables in an urban renewal report that are required, and all those reports are predicated on knowing where your boundary is. In the feasibility study, the proposed boundary was a little under 16% of your total acreage and about 4.5% of your total assessed value. Both of those are well below the statutory restrictions, so that boundary meets everything required in the statute. This is what the boundary in the feasibility study was. I know that I have heard that there are a couple of thoughts about potential additions to this boundary. One might be to go down along Madison Street to Terry Park to add more or a better pedestrian connection from your downtown core down to the park. And then I think other questions were about this big area and what and why it's in the urban renewal area. And when we talked with you at the beginning, and I know some of you have changed since we first started this project, and when we talked with the administration, this area is a potential growth area that will actually help fund anything that's going to happen in your downtown. There's very little assessed value. Again, it was 4.5% of your total city. And not a lot, unless buildings get demolished and rebuilt, and not a lot of new place for growth there. But this is a place for growth that will help fund those projects that you can do in your urban renewal area. There may be other questions that you have about the boundary, and now would be a great time to verbalize those.
So, Elaine, I have a question for you regarding conflict of interest for those involved. There's a number of counselors that live within a block of the proposed boundaries as it is. If we expanded those, that could potentially, the boundary could enclose those as well. Also, where do we say this is a conflict of interest, and those counselors, if we're proposing something, they can't talk about that because, conflict of interest rules are clear. If there's an actual conflict of interest, you're supposed to remove yourself from the discussion entirely. And I'm trying to understand where that works out with setting a boundary.
Okay, I'm not an attorney. I can give you my non-attorney input, and then Preston can maybe chime in. Being within an urban renewal area gives you no monetary benefit whatsoever, unless you end up applying for a grant or a loan. And at that point, you would have to divulge a conflict of interest because you are going to gain some value by the existence of the urban renewal area. So I doubt that just being placed in an urban renewal area gives you any benefit other than the ability in the future to apply for some program. Does that?
It does. I know there was talk before about, well, if you're in an urban renewal district, your property value could go up. That seems, the whole area is going to be going up, and that's the whole point of them. So I wanted to clear that up before we had discussions on, where could we move the boundary to or not.
Very specifically, the city lawyer, because I asked this very specific question, he said if your property is adjacent to the proposed boundary, it could potentially be a conflict because over time, your property value would go up. So
Well, I disagree with that because this whole area is going to improve, which is going to increase the value for every home in this city. So that doesn't make sense.
But I asked the specific question and our city lawyer said if you were adjacent, the word I remember was adjacent.
Yeah.
So can we, Preston or Mayor Sproul, if somebody can actually get our attorney's opinion on that, because 4 out of the counselors here would live within, 4 of us live within a block or 2 of this.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than half the council. So I feel like that's a really important thing to clarify here.
Well, and one lives directly across.
Well, I own one of the lots.
Yeah, we're all kinds of in the mix here. So I feel like
Right.
that's a really
Well,
important.
and if indeed that is true, just on the boundary, would that be true for the whole urban renewal plan? And that to me is pretty crazy. But again, I'm not an attorney and I don't know the conflict statutes. So I guess at some point before our next meeting, which we're hoping to come back next month and further talk about projects, we're going to need the attorney to make some decision, and I'd like to be involved in those discussions so that we know how we can move forward.
So
Well,
I asked that very specific question because I am directly across the street from the proposed boundary. So
Okay.
it's like adjacent, our property lines are connected from the proposed area. He said that it would potentially be a conflict for establishing the boundary because my vote could potentially in the future affect my monetary value of property. After it is established, it's not a conflict with what I work with to help create the projects within the already established boundary. That's what I was told by the lawyer in.
But
was
if
it
that's the
January?
case, that takes Christine, because she's next to it.
She's not technically adjacent. Her block is adjacent, but her
Right.
property,
But
same with
still.
me.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I agree with Kayla because of the fact that then
Any of us
none of
who
us can
own-
even vote on any of this.
Now,
then.
if it's a potential conflict, you can. It's when it's an actual conflict that you cannot. So,
Okay.
so really, if it is a potential conflict, and I have to do this with the fire department staff and the budget every year. If you state a potential conflict, you just have to, I mean, if you have potential conflict, it has to be stated anytime, any kind of vote or discussions having on it. But you're stating it. There is a potential conflict. You're still
Which is
participating.
basically
in-
what the lawyer
You're
said,
still
if your property
participating.
was adjacent to the proposed.
Well, right, then any one of us who owns real property here just needs to
State a
declare the
potential
potential.
conflict.
Yes.
Now, it's when you, say it with someone who had an actual conflict, that is when you will monetarily benefit or not, whichever. Then you would say an actual conflict, and then you would not vote, and you would not participate in the conversation pertaining to that.
Well, can we set up, can we make each one of us make a statement once for the project? Or do we have to do it every time?
If we're talking about the boundary, it would be every time we say, before we enter into these discussions, I have a potential conflict of interest
Okay.
because I live within a block of.
So we would have to do that every time we talk to it.
So let's get the boundary done in just one or two.
Yeah, let's get the boundary done as quick as possible.
I mean, it's a very quick statement. I make it for every budget discussion, every budget vote. It's a very quick one sentence thing.
I'm going to assume that those cities aren't this small and don't have a city council that necessarily lives
Right.
area.
We're all
So I think
Michigan.
this is a unique situation and I would feel more comfortable, especially for because I do not want any sort of conflict of interest to come up later. I would like the lawyer to reiterate the questions that I asked him when he was present for the
You bet.
council meeting prior. Okay.
Maybe Bob,
Yeah,
Bill can make a statement for us that's, tells us what clarifies what it is, and then we can go from there.
We'll have that for next meeting.
Okay, good.
For both being inside of the proposed boundary and then
Whatever
adjacent, or however
adjacent.
close,
Yeah,
where that line is drawn for what kind of
Correct.
tier that would be. Okay.
that'd be great. That'd be good. Now, how do we want to approach these boundary changes? I'm sorry.
Line done. Before we start talking about approaching.
Well, I just want to ask the
Oh,
questions.
oh,
okay?
sorry. Yeah.
Elaine,
Yes.
so how do you recommend that we approach going through the boundary changes that Jim and I think and Greg and even myself would like to see? How do we?
I think the best thing would be for each of you to say what your proposal is, and then to have me talk about it or consider it. And I wish I'd heard them before, but my bet is I can respond to it fairly easily. And then if they make sense, we would vote on each potential change, yes or no.
Okay,
So that makes sense to me.
okay. Do you guys, Jim, would you like to start?
Sure. So I see, we've got this big I property and we're intending to develop that. I think that's great. Our main focus for the urban renewal district is to revitalize downtown. I think that in order to do that, we need a little bit more support. We need to revitalize some of the blocks that are closer to that support downtown. We don't have a lot of empty lots along that 99 corridor, which if we do, they're gonna want to put businesses in there. Parking requirements have been an issue for some businesses I know, that if we were to expand that, a block north and south, and not necessarily every single block, but expand it to where we've got kind of a 2-block zone on either side of 99, so that we can have our fully downtown and then a supportive of downtown area.
I agree with that. Now, what I would like to see is somebody has mentioned going down towards, to be able to sidewalk and stuff down towards Terry Park. I agree that. And the other thing that I would like to see is, I would like to see Commons Park put in the urban growth boundary, because of the fact that we may eventually do something like a community center and library or something in that area, in that Commons Park area as part of this. So I'd like to just kind of make a extension out to encode Commons Park with that. Those are my ideas.
And there was one more idea from someone else?
Yeah, so, I had suggested earlier, and none of us were asked to participate in the boundary definition. So I wish I had been asked earlier as well, Elaine. And it was just a process. They put together a boundary and submitted it to you guys. I don't know who was involved with it. I wasn't, the citizens weren't.
Wait a minute. I thought Elaine is the one that created the boundary. Nobody from here did.
With Preston's assistance. And so it was never presented earlier, months ago, 8 months ago, whenever this came about. No input was asked for, so.
No, I believe, if I recall correctly, Elena planned to do this like she always does, and then bring it to us to do the proposals.
Okay, well, I heard her say she wished she had more notice that we were changing it.
She's talking about changing it tonight.
Okay,
Like she
so-
had the specific-
So in any case, I had mentioned Madison Street down to Terry Park. I agree with expanding couple blocks away from 99, all the way down maybe Commons Park up to 4th Street. But I also think,
It's currently at Fourth Street.
Now.
We're
well,
talking about 5th or?
yeah, I'm sorry, 5th.
Or the opposite.
Yeah, just
the
one
north
block
side-
on each
The
side.
north side of Fourth being included is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Marie's highlight over here. It's similar. That's what I think is, I agree with that. Yeah, just block on each side of the
Just
existing.
pass your mouse around that you have.
Why, okay.
Can
And-
somebody tell me where Commons Park is?
It's, it's south of 2nd Street. It's the whole block that's just, it's a single block.
Okay,
Yeah, so if
Yeah,
you look,
I don't have Terry Park.
if starting on the left side, if you go 1, 2, 3 blocks over,
Well, why don't you mark it?
and then look directly below the green is that giant square. That's our Commons Park.
got it.
And so if you use that as a reference, that's also Bridge Street. And I think that Bridge Street's is in bad shape, and with all this new housing
Yes.
being built down at the end, I would like to see Bridge Street somehow incorporated it as we would do Madison down to Terry Park. I don't know how far up we should go with that, but those sidewalks are terrible. And you have to cross from the left side to the right side to the left side to the right side as you go up that street. And then at some point, there is no sidewalk. So,
And this is your extension for Terry Park. So this is what it looks like.
right,
And what
right. And I'm talking about going up Bridge Street as well. So we're coming down Madison towards Terry Park. And I think we should go up Bridge Street towards Veterans Park or further. And work on those sidewalks as well, or have them part of the boundary so that at some point, there's funding for those sidewalks.
Bridge Street is a completely different project than an urban renewal group. And you're absolutely right. We need to work on grants and stuff like that to actually redo Bridge totally. And that's going to take quite a bit of money last time I think we had it, estimated, it was like 3,000 or 4,000. Million, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'll pay the 3,000 or 4,000. if it's all done. Get some sidewalks on there.
I'll go have this.
These masks tongue tiny and
So this is what you're proposing?
yeah, this is what I had. Now, if it agrees with everybody else, I don't know if it does with Jim, but that's what I was looking at.
So Elaine, is it typically wise in your experience to include parks where they don't add any value, but I guess for this purpose, we would be trying to use some of the funds to rejuvenate the park?
I've done that in many, many communities. Because providing a nice environment for both your city and for the businesses is part of what makes a business district healthy. So having a place where people want to come and bring their kids and hopefully then walk over and buy lunch or dinner at a neighbor business. So it's certainly an acceptable and okay expenditure. You want to make sure you don't spend all your money on things that don't increase value, but a portion of it is certainly acceptable and widely done.
You just want a copy of that, Jim? So you don't have to, we can get a copy of it.
I'm just about done here, but
I
Yeah,
have to say that I do support Marie's proposal because Marie's proposal would encompass the 2 city parks that are most underutilized in our city, which are also over a full city block, which is what, about an acre of property? So there's 2 parks that are underdeveloped and underused, and I support adding those for the purpose of development and use for the citizens.
So I guess just
You want a copy?
one other concern, or not concern, but question I would have is taking into account Marie's proposed boundaries. I suspect that's going to put us over our total acreage / assessed value limit. And then we'd have to reduce some of.
Yeah, I doubt that it will take you over your assessed value limit because right now you're only at 4% and you're not doubling the, I mean, you would have to, you go up to 15, so you would have to have twice as much assessed value being added in those new areas, and I don't think that would be true.
Okay.
On acreage, you're at 15. Well, I'm sorry, you get to go up to 25%.
Oh, 25.
Yeah, on acreage, you're at 15.9. So you get percent. I would imagine all of that will fit. And if it didn't all fit, what you could maybe do is just allocate a portion of Terry Park where you think there might be facilities.
Yeah, no, okay, that was just a concern. I didn't know we had 25%. I thought my recollection was 20%, so.
That's 25.
Thank you.
so Marie, on your boundary, you've got kind of over here past where the downtown corridor ends to the right. What was your thinking on including that?
Well, what I was thinking is the fact that, that's where I believe that's where
I didn't get it.
the schoolhouse is.
I think the schoolhouse is the last green on the corner.
Is
that
the last
one
green,
line,
okay.
I think.
Well, the house past the schoolhouse
Yes.
is a very old house. And I thought that it would be neat to have it in there, that if we decided to do something, it could be something part of our historical area or something,
Good idea.
Okay.
and that's why I went that far out.
And then south of over by Commons Park, you've got some highlighted area that's directly south of that, but over the railroad tracks, and it's a little bit disconnected from Terry Park. It's just it's a big land area, but I don't know. So if you've got Commons Park here, it's kind of what fits into the river bend.
Well,
Yeah, that,
Yeah,
it's,
that's it.
it's south of the railroad track.
Those are properties, yeah.
Is that-
I just drew on there.
So you have Commons Park and then,
Isn't that, did I make a mistake? I thought that was Commons Park right there.
Where it dips down is not, so this is not.
right, so this big square is,
Okay,
but below it, actually the county owns that property. Believe it or
Well,
not.
then-
We don't want to do that.
Well,
I don't know why the county owns that, only that section of Lafayette along the river, the county owns it.
well, then maybe what we want to do there in that last section is cut it in half and take that section out of there, like that.
So
Yeah,
what
so
you're
stay
talking
above, stay north of the railroad track. there.
Right,
can I see that?
yes.
Can I see what?
Here's your original, these are copies.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's.
I'm not a very good mapper. and
Yeah,
I
and I'm
was
trying
kind
to
of
figure out what you're talking
confused
about.
as to
So,
which, because
Um,
unless I have
because I
street
live
names,
there.
I don't really know where I'm at, so.
I'm
Right.
sorry, I don't know why our GIS person didn't put street names on this. I seem to fight with them to do that all the time. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Mom.
Oh, sorry.
I think if you end at Ridge Street, it's more effective, like.
Here,
And this part here and take me out. This is me, right?
You don't want to be in?
I've combined my 5 city lots into 1 city lot, so it cannot be developed, it cannot be built on, because that house is very old and very historic. So I'm just saying
Oh,
that
thank you.
that is mine, so I'm being clear about
So
that.
you want out? So what you're saying?
I'd kind of like.
those are all your
discussion.
copies, you don't have to.
So I would almost say if we're taking this out, let's connect the 2 blocks between Terry Park and that and just, I mean, revitalize that whole area.
The whole Water Street,
Yeah.
that side of
That
Water.
down
Street
there?
where the-
Yeah, that whole side.
There's a really cool old house back there.
Yeah, let's do
There's
that. That
2,
sounds good.
there's 2 century homes in that section.
I need to.
No.
I need to see.
Me and Greg have identified the century homes in that area.
These like
There's,
these ones. right here.
there's 2 of them.
Okay, Greg, there you go.
There's technically 3
Well, no, I didn't.
in that area,
We
right
we
there.
decided we decided to do this here.
On this side.
We decided to do
So,
this here.
in
This
this
one.
area.
Yeah,
on Water
see, we're
Street,
gonna get
there's
rid of
one-
Get
this
rid of
here,
that.
and then we're gonna just
And
continue
that's
on
what
down.
Jim just
Yeah,
said.
that's what Jim just suggested.
That- this little block.
Yeah,
So one of them's hidden.
Yeah, where she had, so it's basically just.
Can't pass it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, with that line, it shouldn't step.
Okay, so that's one, and then the other one.
Yeah.
you know, I think if we make those changes, I think that we have a good area and a lot of different things that we can do.
So the other question too, Marie, your property that's kind of keyhole there. What about those properties that are west of that? Just north, so
This is-
north of 99, we have like 4 or 5 properties there that are excluded. Would that make sense?
I'm sorry,
Your property,
yes,
the ones to the west of it, the 4 or 5, they're not. Are those properties that would make sense to try to revitalize or offer incentives to?
you mean, these down here?
That row
He's
of
talking,
ones.
Yeah.
yeah, he's talking about all these. in here.
You know, I don't
Barber
see
shop and,
what's you're gonna be able to do that, because you've got businesses there.
Mhm.
And then you've got a house that extends a long ways that sets back, that's just been redone.
Right,
And then you've got the dip.
okay. And a couple of those were just built by Don Laird a few years
Right.
ago, so they're not likely to be.
No.
Okay,
The one green one that is my property that hasn't been built on yet, the 2 next to it are the ones that he just has built on.
Mhm.
And so there's not much that we're gonna get out of those.
And that house in there was just remodeled, I mean, that was just redone.
All that was done. Yeah. It's not a duplex, it's one house.
It's one really big house.
It's a big house, and then they built a driveway down, so that they've got another house underneath back there and stuff like that, so it's pretty big thing. But I don't think that there's anything that we can revitalize there.
okay.
I mean, the only thing that we could put there, or the only thing I could see that we could do is maybe sidewalks through that area, but it doesn't really make sense, because then you hit the gully, you hit and you can't put sidewalks there, so I think probably this is the best that it was, that we can do.
Well, we've got this whole area on the south that if we wanted to do sidewalks on that side, that we
Yes,
could. Okay.
Yeah, on this, on
I think on
the,
one side of the street is important, but not, you don't always have to have it on both.
well, on the south side, there's a lot of, there's some businesses, but there's a lot of space in between them. And then there's a lot of area for sidewalks if we wanted to and stuff like that. So we could do that.
Okay. One, oh, sorry, go ahead, Elaine.
I just wondered, because Counselor Gilgan is not in the room and can't see that, if somebody at some point would describe your additions, and after this meeting, we can put them on a map and send it back out for people to confirm. But if
That would be great.
could at least hear what you guys are all looking at, I think that would be helpful, because I want to know if anybody is opposed, right off the bat, opposed to something, and if so, let's not include it. But if everybody's generally okay, then
Sheila has requested that, well, Sheila, I would say, I hate to take it off of there because we could put sidewalks, different things down that street. And if your property is not there, you'll lose that sidewalks and different things on your side.
There will never be in my neighborhood, there will never be sidewalks on the south side.
Okay,
All the sidewalks coming and going are proposed for the other side.
okay.
So we're talking 30 years or more down the road, there might be sidewalks on that side. That, number one. Number two, the sidewalk in front of the house, I maintain, like I take care
Well,
of it. It's not,
Even,
That's how you're
not
supposed
gonna
to.
need, right, it's not gonna need replaced. is
Oh,
my
okay.
point. Yeah.
Well, it's for the others, your side of Bridge Street, so that we can put in nice parking for people to park overnight for you.
mhm.
There's already a sign that says no overnight parking. Not
Okay,
even
does
for
everybody
my
agree that we can take Sheila's house out of there?
Perhaps what's in here.
It's the last one on,
You guys have it,
So-
so as you are sitting there, engaged in the conversation, is there any? Right, that's why I gave you like.
No, that was exactly what I was envisioning as people were mentioning.
Okay. I was like, okay.
So,
so this.
so normally I would say, let's look at the businesses that are on the block in front of you. But where you said you have a historical house and no intention of developing it, then I don't
In
see a
fact, I
strong
made it
reason to
extremely hard.
say it needs to be included.
I made it hard to try to develop my property in the future for anybody.
So
Well, it's
I'm okay with that.
It's not gonna hurt us if it's not in there.
So if we go over, what areas do we want to take out first?
Well, she
Right.
said that we're not close to going over because we're at a certain percent and we can go up to 25%. So I think we're
Okay.
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
If we give her this proposal and she writes it up a new map, then we can discuss it next month with the changes that we've made.
okay.
Is that,
Yeah, what she'll do is she'll give it to us ahead of time and we can take a look at it, maybe touch bases if anything wants to be changed, and we can get back to her about
my only
that.
question is, maybe you missed it on the highlight, but this piece right here is missing from it. Isn't that a current business?
It's just because I didn't get to highlight that far enough.
Okay, I was just double checking because it wasn't included in her green section to start with.
Yeah, no, see the mark here, it's all out to here.
Okay, I was just double checking because it wasn't in her green.
Thank
You
you.
missed it, the highlight, like
Thank
you
you.
did that on purpose.
Well, I'm just going like this, so, okay. So this is what I have.
Elaine, you said you would like us to describe what it is we've all sat here and sketched out. Would that be?
like Counselor Gilgan, well, that.
Right, right.
Well, let's have him speak, and then I don't need it described because somebody will scan that. out.
Scan it.
But Counselor Gilgan, what would you like?
I'm following along pretty well here with the map up in front of me. There's a couple parts where I had to piece together later because they said this area, but then it came up. I'm actually following along okay, and I'm pretty agreeable to this.
Okay.
Okay.
So
The only thing I would like to know, because
Yeah.
we want to get close, if somebody is totally disagreeable with something, to voice it now.
Second.
Nobody is voicing it now, everybody is in agreement,
Okay,
okay? So,
so this proposed,
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Sorry.
this proposed boundary, it would put my house in, would put yours as well, Christine, and Sheila would still be adjacent, and you would have a property in it, right? So Now,
You know-
as long as we're disclosing that, right?
Yeah.
I think later people say, well, why do that? So one other thing that I had thought of with the intention of, we've got a nice, strong central corridor and we support it. We've got commercial down there. I actually already live on a block. It's like one of the only ones that's residential commercial, so it allows for mixed use. I would like to see that pushed out as well. It doesn't necessarily have
You'd like
to.
to see the zoning change.
I'd like to see the zoning change, and I know Elaine has good experience with that, that would make that easier. We don't necessarily have to change every single block, but I would like to have that be a focus of, to allow mixed use for supporting our downtown district.
Yeah, we can, that's a subject that we can talk about. Can't we, Elaine, about changing the zoning on some of this?
An urban renewal plan does not change zoning.
No, we know that. We
Um,
know-
So that's something that you can talk about but as we go forward in this plan and adopt the plan, part of that process is not changing existing zoning. That has to be your own separate process that the city already has established for how you go about changing zoning.
Well, that's something that we as a city can address.
Well, but it can be a project that urban renewal can fund as to a planning analysis of potential.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Jim. Okay, anybody else? We're sitting at our time limit here, Elaine. What more do we have to go through?
Well, we can defer more if we need to. Because
I think settling the boundaries tonight was a very important thing.
okay.
I think we accomplished quite a bit nicely.
Okay, before your next meeting, it would be really helpful for you to both have read my memo on projects and to look at this. I think I sent it out in a PDF to look at the other projects so that you have an idea of the types of projects that are done. So that in the next meeting, we can both confirm the boundary, hopefully, and start to having a fruitful conversation about what projects you think will be beneficial for your city.
The question that I have about projects and money and stuff like that, if we don't have any specific projects that we can define right now, can we set up blocks of money, for instance, like so much for facade changes, so much for streets, and so much for this, rather than specific projects?
Yes. So your types of projects would be under, and these are from me knowing your area and knowing, I know Lafayette pretty well. I go through it back and forth all the time. I gave you, and we don't have to go through this tonight because I know you have other stuff, but lists of potential projects. So for example, under business assistance, you don't have to say which property. This can just be an authorization to do this kind of activity within your plan. So
Like a loan, for instance.
yes. And so in the future, you would set up a program where people would apply for assistance, and then you would pick which properties, but this would just your plan gives you the authority to do any of these kinds of activities.
Okay.
So housing development, same kind of thing. It would give you authority to do housing development and authority to do pedestrian pocket parks, different kinds of things in your downtown. So, and I just showed you some pictures of other things other cities have done. So if you don't have time tonight, I totally understand, and we won't go through, because this would take at least another half an hour to go through all of that. And we can totally do that in the next meeting. So I think you guys did a great job collaborating on the boundary. And if somebody will send me, scan it and send it to me to show me what you want added, then I'll send it to my GIS guy. We'll put it together and look at the acreage and assess value, and we'll get names put on the streets. and then we'll revisit it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our project for next week is, next month is, projects that we want to do and we want to see in the downtown area and stuff like that. So that's what we'll have to do. Okay, well,
Did we ask for any input from anybody? I can't remember if we did or not.
input from anybody.
I
In the
did
audience.
ask them.
We did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
And I
I'm
took a
sorry.
map over to them so they
Okay.
can see what we're talking about.
okay.
Okay, so thank you, Elaine. We appreciate your help. And we'll get that map to you. And if you can get that back to us whenever, we'll go over it. We'll all go over it ahead of time.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next one is Jim's, urban renewal is done. Jim's request, the, adjustment of the, what are they called?
System development charges.
Thank you. System development charge for an ADU. Would you like to start the discussion out since it was your,
Sure. So I wanted to bring a discussion to council. Definitely not ready to make any decisions yet. Several years ago, the Oregon legislature passed a statute that said any city over a certain size had to allow ADUs as part of their building code. I know that a lot of work was done through the Planning Commission in Lafayette to make that work, and there's still some changes that are coming through that. But one of the biggest barriers to ADUs is the system development charges. And you know, the Oregon legislature put out and said, while cities can do some of these things, we recommend to try and reduce barriers to ADUs. The ADUs, you know, they can be beneficial for homeowners where they can bring in some supplemental income. They're good because they're typically the smaller rental units that have the lowest vacancy because there's such a high demand for them. So if you have a good ADU program in place, then it can really solve some problems with affordable housing. And we don't, that I know of, have a big homelessness issue in our town, but that's not the case, you know, just one town over. So there definitely are benefits to having ADUs. If it's done correctly through the permitting process, then that would adjust the property taxes some. Again, the homeowner would be getting some funding every month to offset that, but that would be an incentive for the city that they would get a little bit more in property tax revenue each year. So to date, there have been no ADUs that have been built in Lafayette that I'm aware of since this went through, because currently to build an ADU, you need to pay the full system development charges for what a house would be. And we just passed an increase. It's real close to 20,000 now. So I said, well, usually somebody's already done something or tried something. So let's see what has and has not worked. My main example at a previous meeting was Portland, and it incorrectly says here on the face sheet here that Portland subsidizes accessory dwelling units. They don't subsidize it, they just waive the fee. So currently we're not getting anything for ADU system development charges. So if we were to reduce the fee or waive part of it or all of it for a certain amount of time, for a certain number of ADUs, we would not be losing money, but we could be finding out if ADUs in a few examples would be right for the city. The next page, I've got various examples of cities and what they've done, and each one's a little bit different. One article I saw on Springfield, and I'll kind of focus on that because that was kind of what I thought was the most important points that it hit. It's talking about what Springfield did. So back in 2017, they began waiving SDCs for ADUs for a 2-year period. And then the council extended that by 3 years, subject to an annual review. They've only received, 13 applications for the ADUs. And let's see, I'm scanning this real quick. So it was, they heard from people that said that they wouldn't have even considered putting an ADU in if it weren't for the waivers. So I want to engage in a discussion that says, hey, So I guess it comes down to, does Lafayette or does the city council want ADUs in this town? Do we want people that say, yes, I want to put an ADU in? Do we want to help them do it the right way? Or do we want to say, no, we're not gonna, because in the last 3 years, there haven't been any, and I don't see that changing very quickly. So do we want them? And is there something we can do for either a limited time or a limited number or both to say, let's try it out and see what we can do? We could waive 50%. We're getting 0 now, so we'd be getting 50% more for, the first 5. Or we did the same thing with the downtown facade grant. Nobody was doing it. We had to increase the incentives. So I want to facilitate a quick discussion on that, on what people think. Do counselors support having ADUs? Because I think that's what it comes down to is, do you want to see them done the right way? So there's my spiel.
Okay, we've got 20 minutes, guys, to talk about this.
Okay, well, I'll jump in here. First of all, this is the first time you mentioned in all our discussions about affordable housing. And cutting back on development fees, is not affordable housing. You have to target it for actual affordable housing.
I meant affordable renting, right? That people can be renting a place affordably. That's what I was talking about.
And even though Portland doesn't use the word subsidize, that's exactly what it is. We've done a report, a methodology on all of our infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, and parks. Determined what those development fees are as an impact on everyone else that lives in the city that's already invested in those things. So when that gets changed or those get waived, it's a subsidy. So yes, we have a housing crisis in Oregon. Or the state of Oregon would allow to see an ADU on every lot in the state. We have standards for that kind of development. Not everybody in the city would be able to do it, even if they were given a subsidy. There's only so many people that can do it. So
Now, let's stop just a minute here. You said there's only so many people who used to do it. When we did the urban growth boundary change, what did they estimate that would be the people that could do an ADU? Wasn't it only like 4% or something?
I think it was 1%. So I'd have to revisit that with Jim. And but I think it was of all the extra housing units that we needed to meet our 20-year horizon.
Right.
And that was based on what could be achieved in the city, what might be outside. So Jim Jacks would have to confirm that number.
But it was a very small amount of lots that would facilitate an ADU, is that correct?
You're talking about within the urban renewal area,
Well, that's the whole city.
Within the city limits.
urban growth boundary.
Well, the urban growth boundary is the city limits.
Yeah.
Right, so there's an urban growth boundary, this is city limit, and the urban renewal area is the one we were just talking about.
Right, no, this is the urban growth boundary.
Okay.
The whole city.
So any single family home can have one.
No, they can't.
It's a minimum lot.
If they can build it this far from the house, this far from the property line,
It has
there's all
setback
these
lines,
different-
it has everything. So
there's
not
different
all,
criteria.
so
Okay.
not all the lots can facilitate an ADU.
And do we
Okay.
know with the new housing development coming in, has that been looked at, if that's gonna be feasible on those
I
lots?
think those are kind of.
It doesn't look like
They
it.
look tiny, but I
Yeah.
just, I don't. I
Well,
didn't-
for attached perhaps, right?
Yeah.
Detached, you definitely need more setbacks.
Anyway, so I'm sorry for interrupting. I just thought we needed to clarify that. Thank you. Go on.
So these examples from other cities are good, but the smallest city on here is like 5 times our size. Implementing a program like this, where you talk about annual and this, that, who gets what. I mean, as a small city, we make things very simple, with fairness to everybody. Simple administration. These are, there's very little we can glean from a lot of cities that are huge. that have staffs, that have departments. Not that we can't be innovative, but I come back to the point here is what is the public benefit of allowing somebody to create an apartment so they can, why subsidize that for them? Is that a public benefit for everybody in the city? I say, no, it's not. So be clear on what the public benefit is. We haven't, before you get too deep into this, what is the public benefit of subsidizing or waiving development fees? My entire career, most of it has been in smaller cities, and I've always tried to push, don't waive system development charges. Don't waive development fees. New development coming into the city should pay their fair share of impact on our systems. This proposal, a lot of what these other cities do, they don't look at it that way.
So if I may, if you're,
Yes.
the beginning of this, why the conversation came up is when it was presented to us to update the SDCs, there was no distinction between a new build home and an ADU. And there is a difference on size, which means how many people will be using an ADU, living, dwelling inside the ADU versus a standard home. That's the first thing. So when we had the public meeting, it was back in the very beginning when Zoom was a new thing for people. And so when we opened up to comments, we had Greg, who was not on the council at the time, made a statement, and Travis Johnson made a statement via an email. And what I personally remember is that Jim asked if they could be divided between the SDCs for a new build and the SDCs for an ADU dwelling. And the response was, that's not how we typically do things. Moving forward, Greg and I had the conversation, because he was not sitting council, that he would have responded to what Travis had said. I believe Christine or one of the counselors read out Travis's email so that it could be a response. So in a typical situation, not COVID, not Zoom, not whatever, which we were muddling through, the citizens would have responded to what was said by Travis, and then a conversation would have been had on that, which may or may not have affected the vote or the request for it to be separate. So for me, I feel like it should be separate. The SDCs for an ADU should be separate from a new build based on the impact to the citizens. You said, state very clearly what the impact would be. Well, the impact for somebody with an ADU, because it's very specifically set how much square footage that consists of, that is different than the impact on a brand new 3 or 4 bedroom house. So for me, I think they should be separate, and I think they should be different fees based on the usage size of an ADU.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Okay, so what you're saying is, and you're building your decision on the fact that because the ADU is smaller than the main house, that the ADUs should be less. Is that correct?
Well, yes, because it's less impact
Okay.
on,
Now, what are you gonna do with the person that builds a 2,200 square foot house on one lot and a 4,500 square foot house on another lot? What impact changes that?
That's not an ADU. An ADU.
No, but it doesn't make any difference whether it's an ADU or not. You're gonna get into the fact that these houses here, I mean, my houses in the park are not over 1,800 square feet, but we paid a full SDCs on each one of the houses. So what I'm saying now is that somebody that has an ADU has a second house regardless of size. It's a second house on the property. So if we're going to adjust his SDCs by the size, then are we going to get into a problem with the community in the fact that my house is only 1,200 square feet, his is 25, the impact is different. Why do I have to pay the same amount? I'm just throwing that out.
Well, I just want to ask Jim, it's kind of your position, like, hey, we haven't had any here. So by for time frame saying certain price or something to see if they come in? Is that your, okay,
So, I mean, it could be a trial and say, yeah, let's see if we offer for a year and say, you know, we're gonna approve up to 5 ADU applications or something and say, let's see if people even want
but
to
I
do
don't
it.
think we could, I don't like the one where it talked about setting a minimum amount because that really triggers what you're saying. Like, because what happens if 7 come in?
Okay. And that's, you know, that's what this discussion is for, but I think, you know, if everybody is adamantly against ADUs and say we don't want them, then, I mean, that kind of goes against the spirit of what
I think a
the
lot
the
of us just
Oregon.
don't know. 'Cause it's
It
not
looks like
here.
Lee wants to-
Exactly. So I don't think that,
Lee, yes?
I don't want to interrupt.
Well, you had your finger up like that.
go ahead.
No, Jim, you can finish your sentiment there first.
Let me remember where it was. So I hear the arguments of everybody needs to pay their fair share. You know, the homeowner that is wanting to build an ADU, they would have already been paid for that house. We're limiting the ADU size to 800 square feet or 40%, whichever is smaller. So it's got to be 2.5 times smaller than what, you know, the dwelling is. I don't think that having a small number of those as a pilot to see, do ADUs work? Do they benefit us? Because we don't know. We haven't seen them. Is worth it. We're not losing money. You know, if people move in, if 2 people move into a 5-bedroom house, then that's the same impact as if, you know, 2 people move into a 2-bedroom house. So there's going to be some fluctuation. Anyway, I think that would be within the noise. If we just open it up and said, we're not going to charge SDCs on ADUs forever and always, then that would be a bad decision. But an introductory, let's try it out, I think is smart to see, do people even want it? Because if nobody wants it, I'll drop this and, you know.
The question
we don't
that I
talk
have
about it.
is, have you talked to any neighborhoods or people that would have ADUs, what they think about that?
I personally, and not citizens here, but elsewhere, larger cities, I have heard that where it's like, I wish I could do this so I could be taking care of my elderly parents and stuff. That's more where I've heard it. I haven't heard much of people saying because they want rentals, but I could see that definitely turning into an issue.
See, the thing that I question and think about is on a rental basis, we've cut the SDCs on this 800 square foot little house, teeny house, whatever you want to call it. Now, these people are renting it out and making money on it. Another thing is that one step into small vacation rentals?
So I didn't touch on that when I was talking about Portland. The first couple of years, Portland just opened it up and said, if you want to do an ADU, you can, we're gonna waive the fee. A couple of years later, they said, okay, we're actually gonna, so it was like a 2-year program. They said, okay, we're gonna extend it, but you actually have to sign a covenant that says you won't use the ADU or the house on the lot as a short-term rental, defined as renting it for less than 30 days at a time, because they wanted to solve the housing crisis, not the vacation housing crisis. So, and that could be something that we look at too, because that, you know, that wouldn't apply to people wanting to take care of their parents.
My concern with that though is the enforcement.
Exactly.
How do you
Who's gonna
enforce that?
enforce it?
So there's a number of cities that have done that, and I mean, there are some underwriting fees that it looks like the cities make the applicant pay for, but that's much more manageable than, you know, $20,000.
Let's get back to Lee. We've kind of forgot about Lee.
Oh, that's okay. I'm used to that in my life. No, something I wanted to follow up on is something that Sheila touched on and then Marie touched on about, you know, the assumption that these ADUs will have less of an impact on our infrastructure. And I just don't agree with that. I know a house in town where 2 adults live and it is a 3,400 square foot house. You know, I know 1,900 square foot houses where there is an adult and a child. I believe that if you have an 800-900 square foot ADU that might have 2 bedrooms in it, you could very easily have 4 people living in that house, and the infrastructure takes a lot. So I think that's too ambiguous and too speculative to rely on. The other point I want to make is that if folks are using these for, you know, long-term rental, that may help with the affordable housing, but it's not necessarily to our constituents. Odds are people are going to be moving here from other towns to take advantage of the housing. What that's going to do is just kind of deepen the pockets of folks who can afford to construct new ADUs. So I'm not super on board yet. I'm still interested to hear the conversation, but at this point, I'm not super on board with reducing the SDCs for ADUs.
So can I add a little more to you?
Yes, please.
So basing it on size is not the best analysis. You've got a home, they've got a family there, they're gonna have 2 cars, they're gonna have water, and they're gonna have sewer hookup, they're gonna use the parks. That's no different than the example Lee gave of the couple that live in a 3,500 square foot home. The impact is the same. And now it's gonna, with transportation, we require off-street parking for our ADUs, just like we do for homes. State law said, no, you can't have that. So now there's even a bigger impact on the public because they're gonna park out on the street if they don't have it on site, you see. So basing it on size again is not the right way to go. It's about the impact and still determining what the public benefit is. You know, what's the public benefit of getting in the marketplace and trying to provide a particular type of housing when there's others already trying to do that? Build apartments, build multifamily, that sort of thing. You know, it would be interesting to find another small city that did this and how they defined, but it'd be hard pressed to find one. These are huge cities. They got a lot of other issues. You know, enforcement, it's a great issue. It gets more complicated all the time, and the more you ratchet it down to just a few people doing it. And I really want everybody to step back and look at what is the public benefit of subsidizing development fees for a certain type, certain people.
Okay.
That is a big question.
Excellent. Let's go to the audience for a minute. Very quick.
According to the statutes, it just handed the planning commission a whole raft of required changes. And we've been in the process of addressing those changes. And part of that is on-street and off-street parking. And that is a definite change. And so when we talk about the impact, I think that was folded into what Oregon has mandated that has to be addressed. So I'm a little confused about public benefit, okay, in any kind of a residential area. I think what is currently happening is more and more people are attempting to address things like, what do I do with my grown children that can't afford a house? What do I do with, you know, my mother-in-law and elderly parents, because of the rising costs of taking care of those kinds of housing things. So when we talk about public benefit, it's also taking into consideration the livability of the community. And that is more important than public benefit to me.
It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of run along the same lines, but anyway.
We could split a few hairs,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
No, you know, the history about on this ADU real quickly is that when the urban growth boundary was done, the council decided that we would allow ADUs, but only in, what was it, R1 or R2, right? RC, was it the RC?
It was RC.
Yeah, the RC district, okay. Then once our urban growth boundary got going, because it took a long time, the legislature had made a change that says that if in any residential zoning has to allow ADUs. So the consensus from the last one was yes, we'd have ADUs, but we would limit them to a certain section of the city. You know, and that, yes.
Not really limited to a certain section, it's limited to certain size lots that can accommodate.
No, it was limited to the code, the designated zoning of the property first. And then after that, it was decided, you know, by setback and stuff like that. But it was, the zoning was the first thing that we set up. But anyway, so that was a good discussion. Anybody have anything else real quick? So I think what we should,
Can I speak?
Oh,
Actually,
yes.
Ears were burning. Highly, Travis Johnson, 1002 Market Street. I was watching and I heard my name come up.
That was me. I'm
Mom,
sorry.
oh no, gotta come in here.
Which was unexpected. So those comments during that time were simply as a citizen thinking that was an idea. I had no intention at that time of an ADU. Now I'm thinking about it. So those are two separate things, really. So I just wanted to come and say that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's nice to see you again. Haven't seen you for a while.
Just to clarify, it came up when explaining the background of where this originally started and the fact that more than one counselor would have liked to have a conversation. We were still muddling through figuring out how to have open public meetings while closed. So you were just the start of that with your letter, and then the lack of ability to respond to your letter.
Okay,
We gotta test this more months too. We just throw out names and see if they show up.
what I'd like to do with this thing is I would like everybody to think about what's been said, do our own research, and then maybe add it to another council meeting as a discussion item still. Because I think you're right, we're still in the discussion phase.
Absolutely.
Can we do that, Preston?
Sure, you have a date in mind?
You know, I don't, I kind of leave those up to you because you know what's going on in the thing, because, you know.
So you seem to be very informed on this particular topic because you were talking about what has now unfolded and what was encompassed in the new legislation that was passed down. If you would be so kind as to share that with an email for the council so that we can see what you were talking about.
Well, very shortly, there's some additions and deletions that are required by the state.
Are they for ADUs specifically? Are they for ADUs specifically?
Yes, specifically ADUs.
Okay.
Because that would be
So-
helpful to facilitate prior to the next discussion if we were
And it seems
knowledgeable
like
about this.
there's a bit of, there's some weeds here,
Mhm.
and we have to part that. And I think that the general discussion started out with fees. And now we're started talking about size and lots and zoning, and that's a separate thing.
Yes, you're right, that is, but the size and stuff, 40% and 800 square feet, feel is a lead in into what type of fee adjustment is wanted or is possible. So it is a combination.
Well, because some of the changes, because they've increased some of the setbacks, requirements, may change what can fit on a particular size lot.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure that anybody can come to a decision without knowing what all of those required changes are.
The setbacks aren't determined by the state, are they determined by our building code?
Oh, it is, and Mr. Shaw is our one of our newest planning commission members. They had a brief discussion on a couple of the statutory updates to ADUs, which they'll have a hearing on November 18th on those two changes.
Okay.
It's housekeeping, basically, to update our code.
Okay.
With those couple of changes, our code is completely in compliance with state law.
Okay.
And so the livability issues Mr. Shaw mentioned, those are in our code. That's what our community standards do. Establish development standards, livability standards. They go hand in hand. Not a good proportion of lots in the city cannot have an ADU. They're
Right.
not big enough. Some could. How many? Not very many. But you mentioned the urban growth boundary percentage. It's very, very small. What we just threw out there to try and part of the housing analysis of what's in the city and in the potential UGB altogether. What is our housing capacity? with a lot of assumptions built into it. So, a lot of lots can't even consider ADU. Travis, very fortunately, has a big lot. He's got a lot of options. And we've got developers that are talking about building apartments and multifamily in the city. That's coming, so the fact that whether we want them or we don't want them, the code allows for it if you meet the standards. So it's not, right now, it's not a question whether you want them or not. They're allowed.
Right.
Where appropriate. Whether you want to subsidize those fees, that's the heart of the matter. You want to subsidize those fees. And why? So that's really the questions, not whether we want them or not.
Yeah, I understand that. And so what I'd like to do, like I said, is let's everybody think about that and do our own research, and then let's have another discussion on it.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me. Thank you for bringing that up, Jim. Okay. The next one is kind of a fun thing that I think is fun, is the ARPA funds. How do you want to spend the ARPA funds? Does anybody have any ideas? Now, Preston has given us a list of stuff that's okay, but nothing very fancy or nothing very exciting, to be honest with you. It's just kind
Not
of,
too sexy.
it's not very sexy. So I was wondering if anybody, I'd like to just have you start throwing things out and see what we come up with.
Now, Marie, you suggested some very good things.
Okay, I'll start out. I suggested that we maybe look at some business grants. And then we also have those coming from the county, the Anthill County. So that's quite a bit. I'm agreement with the water meters. I'd also like to see the software for the water meter billing brought up to date. Our billing is 15 to 20 years behind schedule.
It's ridiculous.
And we have no flexibility in how our statements come out or anything like that. I think if we do the water billing, the water meters, we should also bring ourselves into the 21st century as far as the billing system. Soft costs for the reservoir, which I agreed with him on. A reader monument for the front of the city hall.
I knew you were gonna say that. I wasn't gonna say it out loud though.
No, I'm not talking about a sign that's above the 12. I'm just talking about a monument in the front that I think everybody can live with.
I know, it's been on your radar.
I'd like to maybe see our city signs refurbished. So-
City signs.
Yeah, our city sign on each
City
city.
of Lafayette.
Oh, the welcome
Or do you mean-
area.
Yeah, the ones, they need to be taken down and repainted and refurbished like we did, I think, maybe 10 years ago. 7 to 10 years
It was
ago.
that long ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 5 or 6.
But those are some things that I was just rolling with. Now, does anybody else want to add to that list?
I 100% support upgrading our water billing system. It's awful and nobody can tell how much they pay for what.
Exactly.
The water meters were a big thing for me.
The water meters too. Of course, we'll talk about, we did find something on the water report that we'll talk about real quickly, that I think everybody will be happy with.
Can we drink it?
I don't think so.
Does anybody have anything? Have they thought about anything they would like to see? Sometimes it's kind of hard to develop
I
something,
just
but
kept thinking about the water meters,
yeah.
because I know that's a huge necessity.
I'm fully on board with the business grant idea. I have been kind of flexing my brain to figure out how to kind of push some of this money into the downtown area. So business grants sound like a great idea.
Good, so I agree with business grants. If there's money available from the county for business grants, I would not want a business to say, well, I'm gonna get the money from Lafayette and I'm not gonna bother with the county.
I agree.
So
Yes.
I don't know how to incentivize, and is there a maximum that they can get? If we could, I would have them get the stuff from the county first, and if they still need some,
Which could be
Get
an
it
option,
later.
because I think we have till 2026.
Yeah,
Right.
we have a long ways to do that, and, we can set up some, we can set up some criteria of how we give those out and how much, because not all businesses were impacted the same.
Yeah.
And so, that would be something that we would have to develop.
could we potentially offer 2 levels of funding? One, if they apply for a county grant, so if they want the money, then they apply for both.
I think, I think actually, to be honest with you, I think we can do anything because it would be a program that we would have to develop ourselves in the city. And if we had certain stipulations, like, maybe we want to say, we would like to see your financials for July, August, and September of last year and this year, and compare them to see how much, have them prove to us how much the impact of the COVID was. And then we could go from there, those types. So we have the ability, at least I think we do, to set our own criteria, don't we?
You bet, meeting the criteria of one of the two, what to make necessary or economic impact on small businesses, small profits, and that all fits under the first criteria, a business grant of some sort.
So that was something big on my agenda. And then, like I said, the water meters and the software billing, those 2 things, I think it's time to bring the city and the staff and everything into the 21st century. Anybody else have anything want to talk about? Greg?
Well, I don't have any suggestions on how we should spend this money, as far as what we're discussing now. But it brought up some questions in my mind, and maybe now's not the time, and tell me if it's not, and I'll pause for later. But you're talking about, I heard suggestions for a water billing system software. Okay, how much are we talking? 20 grand, 30 grand, 50
We're
grand?
talking probably 75 to 100,000 because you have to get a whole completely new municipal software.
Okay, and then we are talking, I see 15K for a folding machine for utility bills. So
It's that machine right there.
So, I would like to see what outsourcing our billing system would cost us, rather than apply money towards 85,000 for software and another 15K for a machine to fold and stuff. But again, we can table that for later. I don't have any current suggestions. I want a reader board too, and I've been wanting one for years myself.
Thank you.
I just don't know timing wise, and I guess they weren't meeting our codes before. That's why we couldn't.
Well, it's the reader board that sits up there, that sits 12 feet high and stuff like that.
Right, and you're talking about a monument.
A
that's
monument
flat.
one,
Yeah, I understand the difference. So in any case,
No,
That's-
we're gonna have a long time to figure out
absolutely.
how to spend this money.
years.
It's just, so it's
Yep.
just a good idea to get an idea and start thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah, and I'll be
Jim?
prepared to present some ideas next time this subject comes up.
Yeah.
I'll have some ideas.
so number 2, the make necessary investments in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure, does that apply to like stormwater runoff infrastructure?
You bet.
Because I know, especially in downtown, but even like down Bridge Street, there's places where it needs a sidewalk, but there's a big ditch there. And if we could get, the ditch taken care of by putting in stormwater runoff, then it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to put in sidewalks. So,
Jim, I gotta take that back. I thought, this doesn't say streets. I'm sorry.
no, I'm not talking about streets.
Well, the storm is part of the street system, and I misspoke. It's water, sewer, or broadband. It doesn't say streets. So I'd have to look into that,
Okay.
because the storm system is part of our street system. And what I tried to list here is what's feasible to get done this year, and what our is important to look at for next year in terms of infrastructure. And you know, there's a couple of wastewater projects, all the rest are water. You know, the billing machine, that's both, you know. So I'd have to look at streets. My guess right now is it's not included, but I'll have to find out.
So speaking of wastewater, how's the screen holding up? I know that when Greg and I took a tour that it was a very expensive machine and they were kind of keeping it alive. Is that gonna need replacement soon?
Well, anything could need replacement if it breaks down. But right now, it's doing really good, you know, and that's really a feather in the cap of our staff who have the expertise to keep that going. And so we're good on that right now, yes.
Okay, so what we want to do here is all of us want to keep thinking about these. And I think what we should do is make this another discussion item at another time.
Yeah, program this into next month. And-
Right.
And that gives Marie the couple of meetings too, you're back. And if you're ready, when you're ready, we can do a supplemental budget and spend some of that money in the current year.
Yes.
We can't spend all of that even if we try in the current year. So we have to be what's practical and push other stuff in next year and then even the year after that, you know, so it's it doesn't have to be done all at once. So, but I do want you to try and think about some of the things that are needed this year that helps our utility funds, water and sewer, like some of these projects do.
Okay, so we'll table that and put that back on our discussion item next month. Right?
Okay.
So we're gonna run through the rest of this pretty quickly. The Public Works Department, does anybody have any questions about that?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Comment, we assisted Amity with the emergency repair. I'm happy to hear that we're helping our sister cities. Thanks for doing that. I don't understand how we assisted Dayton in taking the CDL test. Can you explain that or?
Yeah, we had an opportunity to bring someone in and do the training. Oh, no, that was flagging. I'm sorry. We did that. No, the CDL test was, we allowed them to use our back truck
Gotcha.
to do their testing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for helping Dayton as well. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, we have a wonderful relationship with Dayton and they help us. We're kind of.
It was a long time coming, let me tell you that.
No, we've been doing it for many years, even before I got here.
It was a long time coming until it got here. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they're the first ones we call if we need an extra set of hands.
Good.
okay. One thing I asked, how is Greg doing? He's had his first month or so as supervisor. How's he doing?
He's still here.
Nice.
Not scared of me yet.
And
Well, that's a glowing
how are we doing on hiring our utility workers?
We have 2 job offers out.
Good, excellent, excellent. Okay.
And if the process proceeds and comes to fruition, 1st of November, that close, we might have 2 new people on board, yes.
Great, and you'll be fully staffed at that time.
Well, we'll be back to where we were. Fully staffed is a loaded thing. We don't have very many staff in this city at all compared to other cities. We just don't. We have one of the highest ratios of employees for population. We're gonna find it more.
Well, that's another subject,
Yes.
another subject. Okay, as far as the water goes, if you look at the water report, if you'll notice, the percentage of loss is 16.7. Evidently, they discovered a error in the way they were calculating the water from the Bluebird Springs. Is that correct?
That was just an error on the last report. I don't think it's an ongoing error. It was just Greg's doing it on his own now and stuff, and Doug pointed out there was a formula thing, and so.
So are we gonna see 16% in this range continuing or not?
We won't know until we get our meters in.
Okay, well then I
That's way better.
And what page are you seeing on? I guess it was,
2021, the Lafayette water, the systems, right,
oh, okay,
yeah,
The
that,
one just for the colored one.
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I'd like to see 16 rather than
Far right-hand
42,
side,
but
fourth column.
oh, okay.
Right.
we like to see 16 rather than 42, but we can't explain the difference. So the meters will help us narrow the unknowns as to why that is.
Well, regardless, I'm pretty happy with that.
However it got there.
I mean, however it got there, because of the fact, I mean, at least it's not 50 and stuff where we were seeing it. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to add to the water information? Okay, how about the fire department?
I have a request.
Okay,
Well, comment, Christine, you're our go-to person, I think. So we lost 2 members, or 3 members. Didn't we have 17? Now we're down to 15.
I think that was 2, maybe it was 3.
So we lost 3.
two volunteers.
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
Yeah,
Volunteers
sure.
move in, move out, come, go.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I know that, you can look at the report and you can see where, we didn't show up because, we didn't have enough folks to actually answer a call. So when I see this number, we had 461 calls, that sounds impressive, but I would like, I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to know actually how many of those we respond to versus how many we have to let some other department respond to. I don't know.
That would have to be something the chief, I don't know if he can pull that in his reports or
Okay.
it's not
We
anything
can
that I
look
have access to, but
Yeah, we can
that's
look at
certainly
Yeah, well,
something.
and
Yeah.
I know there's a column here that will sometimes tell you if they weren't able to respond to it or not.
Well, I
So,
think it's usually, oh, yeah, I guess this report's a little different than what they normally.
yeah, it's a little bit different, but I know normally there's something there, but I don't know. That's just a
Well,
request,
and-
if that can be accommodated. that'd be
Also
great.
have to add in the calls that we respond to outside of our city. So, it's the best number among all of them is how many calls we get from the city. And that's what we track every month.
Okay,
So the other is a moving target and it may not be easy to track that.
sure, and I don't
We'll
wanna,
look into it.
I don't want people wasting time digging that up if it's not something that's easily
You bet. Thank
available,
you.
okay? I appreciate it. That's all I had.
Okay, and then we have a report for code enforcement. You want to talk about that report? Tell us what's going on with it, Preston?
Well, I think you can see the impact of our new code enforcement officer, who's been with us just about a month here, in a couple of days or a few days, will be here a month. Taking all the list, bringing it up, assessing where we're at on all the ongoing things. A lot of stuff is shown here, resolved. And those will come off the list next month. A lot more staff hours, obviously, but there's a lot more efficiencies and proactiveness that's going to be built into our code enforcement. But you're seeing the benefit of having a full-time code enforcement officer. Yes.
So I had a question on this report. I'm seeing that the source was a code enforcement officer and the date was back in July. And then we have a gap from the end of July to the end of September. Didn't we not have a code enforcement officer in July? And I certainly didn't see any of those cases on last month's report either. So where did all those ones that say they originated in July from a code enforcement officer come from?
Our prior code enforcement officer quit. So I can't remember the date of when that happened.
A new
That
one
was back in
started
May
the
or
end of
June, wasn't it?
August.
Yeah, I don't know.
So is that just a
Uh,
compiling, the new code enforcement officer compiling? Basically, this is where I'm starting because he's compiling all of this stuff
I
from the
think that
previous.
you-
And that's the way that I read it, is that he basically
Yeah.
compiled everything that was kind of up in the air and went, here's the original complaint dates.
Right, way back
And we're
in
getting
July.
way back in
Yeah.
July,
But
but now
here in
I'm working
September
on
where
it,
I
so-
started, I'm gonna follow up on this old complaint.
Yeah.
Which would make sense. It just says there's a source for a resident, which I would think would be a resident complaint, and then a CEO, which I would think that they're proactively. So my thought was, if we didn't even have one, how are they the source and it not be a resident? There seems to be some data inaccuracies there. Also, there's no hours filled out except for a couple of the cases. I would definitely, a lot of these notes are cut off, and a lot of these columns are like 3 letters that I would like to see the most up-to-date information, which is all the stuff that was cut off in here. So it sounds like this needs some formatting so that we can actually see the notes on it versus have a bunch of extra space for just
You bet, Jim.
Yeah, so decrease the first 4 or 5 columns and then increase the last one.
yeah, I mean, if it needs to be on 2 pieces of paper so that we can see what's going on, let's do
Well, I
that.
don't think it does, because if you look at the
It's already on
margins,
the
we have a
page
lot
they
of.
I don't think it does either. I'm saying if that's what it comes to, let's print a second page so that we can see it instead of just having it cut off.
Well, we've come a long way from not being able to read it with a magnifying glass.
Absolutely.
I carry one now.
This is just kind of incremental feedback
Yeah, and-
on how we can do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, see, I really like this because I myself drove around and found about 4 or 5 RVs that they had parked on the streets for months at a time, and they're all coming, see, RV parked on road for weeks, resolved, so we're making progress.
There was one that I wanted to ask about, and Preston, maybe you need to follow up with the code enforcement officer. 21.61, it's like 5 from the bottom. In the notes, it says, it's an RV issue. So it's resolved and it just says RV moved around corner. Is that resolved in the fact that it's no longer a violation as per our code, or has the actual issue been resolved? Is one corner okay to park on but not the other? It seems kind of like it may not actually be resolved.
We could have multiple complaints that we track differently each time it moves. And we've issued a lot of fines. And if it moves around the city and comes back, it's a whole new case. So, if they're in violation for a few days, they could come back next month, it's a whole new case. Or whether, the parking rules are different, you can't live in it. So there are multiple cases on some of a couple of different RVs. And we're going to continue to find them. There'll be a new case number each time they're in violation.
Okay.
Yeah, so these aren't all separate, unique events. See,
Some of these RVs could be the same one.
correct.
It could be the same RV, they just moved.
Moving it around every time.
Around the block, and somebody called it in again, and they moved it again.
So,
There's one I know of by Grant Street.
Yeah.
so I understand that's how things are now. My concern is that by saying, okay, moved around the corner, it's resolved. But around the corner, it may be a problem still, but we have to start over. So we're showing on paper that we're resolving all our issues, when in reality, they just have to move it to a new place and it's resolved, but the process has to start over.
That's just the way it is.
And that's what we need to be able to talk about and change.
Right, and
Well,
I think
welcome
it
to
comes
code
down to
enforcement.
the ordinance, changing of the ordinances as well, and so
Exactly.
that's part of a discussion that we haven't had yet, that we were scheduled to have, that got postponed, so.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, we'll be talking about that. You bet.
We're talking about. Okay, why don't we move on
I
to the
agree
next
with you
thing?
100%, yeah. on that.
The next thing is the administrative. Can you move through your 5 options pretty quickly?
I hope so, Your Honor. Pumpkin Fest is on Saturday, 4 o'clock. It's at Perkins Park, like last year. It's a drive-through event for Lafayette residents. Our mayor's volunteering to hand out goodies, and we'll have uniformed personnel, fire, law enforcement, public works. It was a great event last year, and so we're looking forward to that. We're looking at coming to council probably in December to ask to replace one of our public works vehicles. We have the money, a separate fund. It's a vehicle equipment fund. Our 4-yard dump truck is basically on its last leg. And we don't want to replace that dump truck. It's way too expensive and too big for what we want. So our idea is, as we rotate the next couple of utility vehicles out of the public works, into the public works fleet, there'll be utility vehicles, but they'll have a 1 dump capability. And we figure we need a couple of those. So our next 2 utility vehicles for public work, we're going to ask those have that 1 dump capability. It's much more our speed for what we need. And we still get the benefit of being able to use on a daily basis around town. So I'll be bringing that first one here probably in December for that vehicle replacement. We're at the end of the rope on 3 vehicles, basically. This was an idea from our public works department, which was really great. And they really put their heads together about what do we do with our dump truck capabilities. And this was a great idea to incorporate that into 2 of our utility vehicles. ODOT, you've noticed they're back to 2-lane traffic, which is fabulous. I've already been at a couple of restaurants, and it's just the difference is night and day. It's just unbelievable. And that also happened during the Liberty Weekend, if you remember. The businesses I visited, they were full, had a lot of people, and I tell you, it's a great relief for this. The curbing that's going in now, they're rapidly pacing to get that done so that the final lift to get those last curbings in. And then through the winter, they can work on the sidewalks and the rest of the right-of-way improvements. But I mentioned it when the superintendent was here, Vidal, you might remember him, but throughout the process, we had a lot of things come up all the time, responding to businesses, the public and all, but ODOT was really great to work with in this process. They were very responsive. And yeah, we had some hiccups here and there, but overall, I'm just really pleased at the rapid work, meeting their goal, and always being really responsive to our needs. The last thing I want to mention is we are likely going to have an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision on your next council meeting. So there'll be a hearing. That'll be on November 4th. It's an appeal of the fence decision that the Planning Commission made at their last meeting. So I just wanted to take a minute to remind all the councilors that if you have any questions about that, you need to let me know. I'm not biased. You can ask me anything about those projects, but you have to be objective. This is quasi judicial. You don't do independent research. You don't contact the applicant, all those kind of things. If you have any concerns about a conflict of interest or ex parte contact disclosure, we can talk about that, and help with that. It is your obligation to announce those conflicts if you have any before the hearing, before the discussion next month. I'm not aware of any, but do let me know if you want to discuss that or any matters in that staff report. And a couple of you have already called in and we just had a great discussion on that. So that's coming to you next month and along with a lot of other things. But that's all I have.
Thank you very much
I had
for taking that. Now it's your turn.
I have a quick question, Preston, on the 99 stuff, work that's going on where they're putting sidewalks in. I noticed there's a couple, at least one, I don't know if there's more than one, place on the south side. I think it's down close to Bridge Street where they put the sidewalk in the right place, but the dirt around it is, this high above the sidewalk to where there's now a drop off. Has the city looked into that as far as, I don't know if there's a safety issue of walking along and then you drop 3 feet onto the sidewalk. If that needs to.
Well, I think there's safety issues all over the place right now.
Okay.
But there will not be any safety issues when it's done.
Okay.
I'm not aware of an issue. Our public works grade primarily coordinates with issues. Right now, it's mainly storm issues because we're beyond the water and sewer and the like. So there's that coordination. And maybe the only thing that might come up, I'm sorry, getting a little tangent here, but they may, if they feel like the weather's starting to close in on them, being nippy weather, and it's really rain and temperature affecting pavement, they may ask that they get another modification of the work permit to be ready to pay when the weather's just right, regardless of the day it happens. And that may come up. Right now, they don't think they need to ask for that, but that is something that could come up. I don't know of anything else really, but that was a tangent. That was beyond your question there, Jim, but I'd be happy to look into it. I'm not quite sure where you're thinking, but my guess is all of what you see, it's temporary. It will all be fixed and it'll be beautiful.
Okay, it just seemed like ODOT went as far as probably their requirements for sidewalks, and then it's it's down towards 2nd Street that I'm sure I can either find a specific location for you or not, but
You're talking about Washington Street.
yes.
On both sides of Washington.
Doesn't that look fun?
Yeah, it's technically closed. There's a cone there. There's no sign that says sidewalk closed, but technically it's closed. I would not walk where they're doing that. And I'm also, like you, hoping that there is a solution, not just this is the end of our responsibility. Because then the city does need to look at facilitating some sort of improvement.
Yeah.
Something to go from the ODOT sidewalk to like normal like things. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Well, when all that is done, I'm sure that there's gonna be areas that we're gonna have to clean up.
Yeah, those transition areas for the end of the right of way and how they get into, our systems. ODOT is going to be very sensitive to all of that, but we may have to, do something to help with those transitions. One of the projects on the ARPA list is to complete the looping downtown on one of our mains that we shot across. That's I think it was a $50,000 or $60,000 item. We couldn't do that with this project like we wanted because we didn't have the money. But it's important to complete that looping down there.
Okay, I think you're next.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to make a formal request for a special meeting pursuant to Lafayette City Charter Section 13, which allows 3 or more councilors requesting a special session to compel the mayor to hold said requested special session. This requested session would be held at some point between now and the next regularly scheduled city council meeting in November. The purpose of this special meeting is to enter into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 section 2B, namely to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, namely city administrator Polisek, or in the case that the named person requests that such discussions happen outside of an executive session, the public discussion pertinent to the same ORS. And upon exiting said executive session or completing any requested public discussion, any council business directly relating to the topics provided in the same ORS. I'm requesting the city's attorney be present to answer questions related to and to clarify wording in both our city charter and administrator policy employment contract. I'm requesting that a time be scheduled that allows as many counselors to be present as possible, but the condition is not to override the request that the meeting happen before the next regular city council meeting. In the case that not all can attend, priority should be first given to the city attorney's availability and then to counselors who support the request for this meeting. Given the compulsory nature of Lafayette City Charter Section 13, which states the mayor shall call the special meeting, it is not subject to cancellation or rescheduling by mayor unless those counselors requesting it consent to said change. In order to make this special meeting happen, I only need a second and third counselor to support it. And I'm asking, do I have the support of a second and third here tonight?
I do not support this.
I don't support it either.
I do not support this.
I don't support it.
I support the need for a meeting.
I think I support a discussion, a meeting to discuss it. Yeah, I agree.
I want you to think about this and what you're putting in play here. For some reason, you're asking without letting us know what the problems are and to be discussed, you're asking for us to have a meeting. And I just don't think that this is right.
Okay.
But I will call the meeting,
The
like
charter
you
said-
said. I understand.
If you would like to chat before the meeting with me, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some charges. I'd be interested in hearing what.
So
I think what.
So
we
I
should-
read the definition of the ORS. It does not, it can include all of those. It does not necessarily include all of those.
I'd like to have a list of the charges before anybody votes on this, because you're asking us to vote blind.
I didn't say there were charges.
Well, what is this for then?
I read the ORS. The ORS states that you may enter into an executive session for, it says to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent.
Okay, we'll set up a meeting and we'll get with the attorney on that.
So
and-
are there complaints? Are there charges?
There's not charges that I know of, but that's not. So it's to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or
It would be
charges.
helpful if we know if it was complaints. You said there's not charges.
Is
To
this
ask
also,
blindly to schedule this, it's inappropriate to blindly ask us to go into a special meeting for a discipline hearing without bringing any of it to anybody's attention that there is a problem that's current enough that you feel this is warranted. This is the second time you've actually done this.
It sounds like I have the support this time, Christine.
It would just be helpful if you knew in advance that what it is they're agreeing to in terms of a meeting or the purpose of.
Discussions going on between.
You don't have to agree to anything. There's no motion. I've got a second, I've got a third. There's three people formally requesting it.
So have you discussed this with anybody on the council?
Discuss what?
What you're doing
That I intended to make a request for a special meeting.
and the complaints you're.
I have, but I have not violated any public meeting laws or serial meeting laws in doing so.
Well, you know, if
Is
you have
this
three people
related
that do it, I don't have any choice.
is this related to the fact that the last work session got canceled?
No, it's not.
I have some trials, so.
You have what?
I have some trials, so if we could get the schedule out so I could make sure that I'm present. that'd be great.
Well, the city attorney will need to be present too, so, I mean, is he available to come whenever we need him? I don't know how that works.
Well, you know, what we can do is we can set up a couple of dates and then we can see which ones he's available on.
I'm sorry, Lee, were you trying to say something?
Just echoing your sentiments. This seems just not a decent way to go about this.
I agree. I think it's yeah. Okay, now we have something that I haven't gotten to. We have a work session already rescheduled for the 26th. That's the one that was scheduled in September. So we've got the YCAP, we've got the sheriffs, and we've got the attorney set up so that they can be there that night, the 26th.
Might as well do that.
October 26th.
Yes,
Is that also at 6:30?
yes.
Can we do an executive session, work session? Can we do back-to-back work sessions where we do that one and then just do this second
can.
meeting and just. That way
How
we're
does
not
that
all
work
trying
for
to
you?
come. 26 works for me.
I'll make it work.
Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do is we will have this meeting that Jim wants on right after we have the first meeting, which is for the police thing.
At 6:30?
Yeah,
Considering it's the lawyer. I'm
the
assuming. that it's
lawyers
gonna
we've
be-
already got handled.
Oh, no. When I
They'll
mean-
already be here for that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
so
just
we've got
clarifying for
everything,
that. I heard you say sheriff. I didn't hear you say the lawyer.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry, yeah.
I was just clarifying because I'm like, I don't want to schedule something if the lawyer couldn't possibly be here.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
it's, you need to be on another, it can't be on the same meeting.
Right, so we would close
no, we
one
would
meeting
close
and
one
then
and
open
then
and
start the other one.
Yeah, so you do the work session first.
Yes.
what you said.
And, okay, so that takes care of one of my things that I need to discuss. The other thing that I need to discuss is, we okayed the facade group okayed a second facade for the Ferryman building. What was it, 2 weeks ago?
I wasn't present.
I know, you didn't
missed
show
it.
up.
I called Kevin though, and I'm like, please tell him to start the meeting. There is no way I'm gonna make it.
So anyway, we have the Martha's Tacos we have out, and we have the Ferryman group out. So we've got two things that, now we've only got $50,000 and we used half of it, so we only got maybe 2 more grants that we can do.
But the Ferryman building already started construction, she's already working on the facade,
Right.
which is amazing to see so quickly. Like, I missed the meeting. I'm like, I know how that ended.
So anyway, I wanted to let you know that that was something great that's going on, okay? And we need to have somebody represent us in voting for the LOC. That's the League of Oregon Cities, and they have votes that need to be taken care of, and they're for different things like directors, different things like that. And so, and you need to be available for the meetings. Who'd like to do this?
I'm so slammed right now. Don't
That's the
look at me, I'm
conference.
sorry.
That's the
Well,
conference.
it's not the
or-
conference. This is the league actually has meetings, and you have to vote for things and that type of stuff. And they're doing, unfortunately, the first voting would be October 22nd, which is an all-day Zoom type of a thing with a membership meeting, which you could probably go just to the membership meeting in the afternoon from 11:45 to 12:30, and that would be on Zoom.
Do we know what the votes are for at this point?
No, we
Okay.
don't. You just have to be our representative to vote.
I think you can count on discussion of bylaws. Possibly some actual policy matters of the league for legislative and the like. The city doesn't have to have anybody there, but you certainly can.
I can do it because my schedule so that I can be in these meetings and stuff during the day if you'd like.
I assume they're weekdays.
I'm sorry?
I assume they're weekdays.
Yeah, this is, the first one is
There's just no way
Friday.
Yeah, that's not even.
Not the mid-November.
I can't do it.
How about you, Lee?
I can't do that.
Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and do it for us.
Congratulations.
Well, we appreciate your effort and time because that sounds like a very time intensive.
Well, the nice thing about me is that I have a job schedule and a employment thing where I can just move my schedule around whenever I need to. You know, when you're the boss, you can do that.
Well, not necessarily.
Awesome, I don't get to do that.
Okay, that's all I have. Does anybody else have anything?
Marie,
Yes.
on the special meeting, somebody needs to make a motion.
Oh,
For what motion?
why do we need to make?
No,
a
there's no motion.
There's
It's
no-
at the request of 3 or more counselors. It's not, it doesn't say motion.
And who are they?
Me,
Sheila,
Sheila,
Greg.
and Greg.
And Jim.
I didn't hear that.
And we have it scheduled now. The only thing that I would like to see is I would like to have some information on the meeting itself. And the issues that we'll be discussing,
That's fine.
because I would like to do my research.
Can I ask who prepares the agenda for such a meeting?
I would imagine that the city administrator, because he's the one that is responsible for the agenda for all meetings.
I would like the,
It's not. It would actually be the mayor and the city attorney that get it together.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Marie, then I would like, if possible, the opportunity at the top of that agenda to speak.
Okay,
Once we enter into executive session or before we enter into executive session?
Before.
we can do that. We can open the meeting. We'll have that, then we'll enter in the executive session and go from there.
That, Preston, that's assuming that you don't wish to have it held publicly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. We're piggybacking 2 meetings here, correct?
Right,
Okay, I would like the opportunity to speak first at the meeting for which Jim has proposed.
right, that's what we did.
Correct,
So we're-
thank you.
We're gonna go with the meeting for the sheriff's department and for the, what is it?
The ORS 192-660.
So,
Yeah.
and then we'll do is, once we close that meeting, we'll open up the second one. You can speak, and then we'll go into executive session and go from there.
Thank you.
Okay, I will get with the city attorney, and we will get the agenda done and ready to go.
I move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen,
Aye.
ladies and gentlemen, for a great meeting. We got a lot done. Thank you.
Look, we got it like before 10:30.
Yes, well, I was looking for one.
Oh, yeah, yeah,